The stagecoach lurched to a stop, and Eliza Hartwell's stomach lurched with it. She'd been traveling for 6 days straight. Boston to Chicago, Chicago to Cheyenne, Cheyenne to this godforsaken stretch of Wyoming territory that looked like God had started creating something beautiful and then just gave up halfway through. Her backside was numb. Her dress was covered in a fine layer of dust that no amount of brushing would remove. And the letter she'd been clutching since Boston, the letter that promised her a new life, a good man, a fresh start, was now damp with sweat, increased beyond recognition. "Silver Creek," the driver called out, his voice flat and uninterested, like he was announcing a funeral instead of a destination. Eliza peered through the window. Silver Creek, her new home. Except it didn't look like a home. It looked like a place that was trying very hard to die and almost succeeding. The main street, if you could call it that, was a rutted dirt path lined with buildings that leaned at odd angles, as if they were too tired to stand up straight. Half the windows were boarded up. The other half were just broken. A saloon sign swung on one hinge, creaking in the wind. Further down, what might have once been a general store now had a door hanging open, revealing nothing but darkness inside. There were no people, no horses, no movement at all except for a tumbleweed rolling lazily across the street like it owned the place. Eliza's heart sank. This wasn't right. Marcus Hale's letters had described Silver Creek as a thriving town, a place where ranchers and miners and honest working folk built futures. He'd written about Saturday dances and a new church and plans to bring a railroad spur through within 2 years. He'd written about opportunity. He'd written lies. The stagecoach driver climbed down and opened the door. He was a weathered man in his 50s with a face like old leather and eyes that had seen too much to be surprised by anything. He looked at Eliza with something between pity and annoyance. "This is your stop, miss." Eliza didn't move. She couldn't. Her hands were gripping the edge of the seat so hard her knuckles had gone white. "Miss? I'm looking for Marcus Hale," she said, and her voice came out smaller than she'd intended. "He should be here. He said he'd meet me." The driver's expression didn't change. He'd probably delivered a dozen desperate women to a dozen disappointing destinations and learned long ago not to get involved. "I'm sure he'll turn up. I gotta keep moving. Got a schedule. But, miss, I got 3 more stops before dark. You getting out or not?" Eliza looked past him at the empty street. Every instinct in her body was screaming at her to stay in the coach, to tell the driver she'd made a mistake, to go back to Cheyenne or Chicago or Boston or anywhere but here. She still had 17 cents in her pocket. That wouldn't get her far, but maybe it would get her somewhere. But then what? Go back to Boston? To the boarding house where she'd scrubbed floors for 3 years? To the landlady who'd looked at her like she was a stray dog that might bite? To the certainty that she'd end up like Sarah Pritchard, 45 years old, still washing other people's sheets, still pretending that someday something better would come along? No. She'd made her choice when she answered Marcus Hale's advertisement in the matrimonial newspaper. She'd made her choice when she'd spent every cent she had on a train ticket west. And she was going to see it through, even if Silver Creek looked like the place Hope went to die. Eliza stood up, smoothed her dress as best she could, and stepped down from the stagecoach. The driver tossed her trunk down beside her, a battered thing that contained everything she owned in the world. 3 dresses, a hairbrush, a small Bible her mother had given her before dying when Eliza was 12, and a photograph of her parents that was so faded you could barely make out their faces anymore. "Good luck, miss," the driver said, and he sounded like he meant it. Then he climbed back up, snapped the reins, and the stagecoach rolled away down the street, leaving Eliza standing alone in the center of Silver Creek with a trunk at her feet and no idea what to do next. The wind picked up, sending dust swirling around her ankles. Somewhere in the distance a door banged shut, or maybe it was a shutter. It was hard to tell. Eliza looked at the letter again, even though she'd already memorized every word. "Dear Miss Hartwell, your letter has brought great joy to my heart. Silver Creek is indeed a town of opportunity, and I believe we could build a fine life together here. I am a man of modest means but honest work. I run a cattle operation with my brother and have a house that needs a woman's touch." It went on like that for 2 pages, talking about his ranch, his prospects, his hopes for a family. He'd seemed kind, thoughtful, a little lonely maybe, but who wasn't? And now he was nowhere to be seen. Eliza folded the letter and put it back in her pocket. Then she picked up her trunk. God, it was heavy, and started walking toward the only building that looked even remotely inhabited, a structure at the far end of town with a crooked sign that read Silver Creek General Store and Post. The door was open. That was something, at least. Eliza stepped inside and was immediately hit by the smell of dust, mildew, and something that might have been rotting vegetables. The store was a disaster. Shelves were half empty and disorganized. Barrels sat open with their contents spilling onto the floor. A counter near the back was buried under piles of paper, receipts, invoices, ledgers, all mixed together in a chaotic mess. Behind the counter sat a man who looked like he'd given up on life sometime around 1885 and hadn't bothered to catch up since. He was thin, balding, with wire-rimmed spectacles that sat crooked on his nose. He was staring at a piece of paper like it might suddenly make sense if he just looked at it hard enough. "Excuse me," Eliza said. The man looked up, startled. His eyes went wide when he saw her, probably because women showing up unannounced in Silver Creek wasn't exactly a common occurrence anymore. "I'm looking for Marcus Hale," Eliza continued. "Do you know where I might find him?" The man blinked. Then he took off his spectacles, cleaned them on his shirt, put them back on, and blinked again, as if he couldn't quite believe she was real. "Marcus Hale? Yes, I'm Eliza Hartwell. I'm supposed to marry him." The silence that followed was long and uncomfortable. The man set down his piece of paper very carefully. He folded his hands on the counter, and then he said, in a voice that was almost gentle, "I'm real sorry to tell you this, miss, but Marcus Hale is dead." The words hit Eliza like a physical blow. For a moment she couldn't breathe, couldn't think. The store tilted sideways and she had to grip the edge of the counter to keep from falling. "Dead?" "May been dead going on 4 months now. Got thrown from his horse up near Cooper's Ridge, broke his neck. 4 months. Marcus Hale had been dead for 4 months, but Eliza had received his last letter 6 weeks ago. That's not possible," she said, and her voice sounded far away like it was coming from someone else. "I got a letter from him. He said..." "What'd the letter say?" Eliza pulled it out with shaking hands and showed it to him. The man read it over, his expression growing darker with each line. "This ain't Marcus's handwriting," he said finally. "Marcus could barely write his own name. This here's too neat, too flowery." "Then who his brother had to be. Jacob Hale." The man spat the name like it tasted bad. "After Marcus died, Jacob took over the ranch, or what was left of it. Marcus had debts all over town, owed money to half the folks here, including me. Jacob settled some of it, but not all. Then he just disappeared, took what he could, and left. Reckon he was sending letters to women back east, promising them marriage, getting them to come out here." "Why would he do that?" The man looked at her like she'd asked why water was wet. "Money. You bring money with you?" Eliza thought of the 17 cents in her pocket. "No." "Then I reckon Jacob figured you did. Probably thought you'd show up with savings, maybe jewelry, something he could take before running off. He did the same thing to 2 other women last year. They came out here expecting husbands and found nothing but empty promises." The room spun. This couldn't be happening. Eliza had left everything behind. She'd spent every cent she had. She'd traveled halfway across the country. And it had all been for nothing, a lie, a trap set by a con man who'd probably already moved on to the next desperate woman in the next town. "What happened to the other women?" Eliza asked, though she wasn't sure she wanted to know. "One of them went back east. Her family sent money for the ticket. The other..." The man hesitated. "She stayed a while, tried to make it work. But there ain't no work here, not for women, not for anybody, really. She left last spring, don't know where she ended up." Eliza felt something cold and hard settle in her chest. "So what you're telling me is that I'm stranded here, in a dying town with no money, no family, and no way out?" The man didn't answer right away. He just looked at her with those sad, tired eyes, and Eliza realized that he was looking at someone he'd already written off as doomed. "I'm sorry, miss," he said finally. "I truly am. But Silver Creek ain't a place for second chances. It's barely a place at all anymore." Eliza stood there for a long moment, staring at the cluttered counter. at the mess of papers and the dusty shelves and the entire ruined wreck of what was supposed to be her new life. And then something inside her snapped. Not broke. Snapped. Like a branch that had been bent too far and finally decided it was done bending. "Who are you?" she asked. The man blinked, surprised by the question. "Name's William Kowalski. I run this store. Or I used to, anyway. Ain't much left to run." "How long have you been here?" 15 years? And you're just gonna let it die?" Kowalski's expression hardened. "I ain't letting anything happen, miss. Silver Creek's been dying since the silver vein ran out in '85. Folks left. Businesses closed. There's maybe 20 people still living here, and half of them are too old or too stubborn to leave. I stayed because I got nowhere else to go and no money to get there. But that don't mean I can stop what's happening." Eliza looked around the store again, really looked this time, and she saw something Kowalski probably couldn't see anymore because he'd been staring at it too long. Potential. The shelves were disorganized, but they still had goods on them. The counter was buried in paperwork, but that meant there were records, accounts, transactions, debts. The store was a mess, but it wasn't empty. And if there were 20 people still living in Silver Creek, that meant there were 20 people who needed supplies. "Mr. Kowalski," Eliza said slowly, "do you know who owes you money?" "What?" "Your accounts, your ledgers. Do you know who hasn't paid their bills?" Kowalski gestured at the chaos on the counter. "It's all in there somewhere, but I ain't got time to sort through it. I spend all day just trying to keep the store open." "How much do you think you're owed?" "Hell if I know. Could be $100, could be 500, maybe more." He laughed bitterly. "Not that it matters. Can't collect from folks who don't have money." "And if I could collect it?" Kowalski stared at her. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying I need work, and you need someone to sort out this mess." Eliza pulled herself up to her full height, which wasn't very tall, but she made it count. "I'll organize your accounts. I'll figure out who owes what, and I'll collect the debts. In exchange, you give me a percentage of what I bring in, 10%. You're crazy. Maybe. But I'm also broke and stuck here, so I might as well be useful." Kowalski looked at her for a long moment. Then he looked at the pile of papers on his counter, then back at her. "You ever done bookkeeping before?" "I worked in a boarding house in Boston for 3 years. I kept all their accounts, managed their inventory, and collected rent from tenants who were very creative about avoiding payment. I'm good with numbers, Mr. Kowalski, and I'm very good at convincing people to pay what they owe." Another long silence. Finally, Kowalski sighed, a deep, weary sound. 10% of nothing is still nothing. "Then you've got nothing to lose." He laughed at that. It was a short, sharp sound, but it was the first time she'd seen him come close to smiling. "All right, Miss Hartwell, you want to waste your time digging through my disaster of a bookkeeping system, be my guest. But don't expect miracles." "I don't believe in miracles," Eliza said. "I believe in work." She spent the rest of that day sorting through Kowalski's papers. It was worse than she'd expected. The man had been running his store like someone who'd given up on keeping track of anything years ago. Receipts were mixed with personal letters. Invoices were stuffed in drawers with old newspapers. His ledger, the main book where he was supposed to record all transactions, had entries from 1886 right next to entries from last week, with no apparent system for organizing them. But Eliza had dealt with worse. In Boston, she'd worked for a landlady named Mrs. Greenwood who'd kept her financial records in 3 different notebooks, 2 cigar boxes, and a drawer in her bedroom that smelled like mothballs and regret. Eliza had spent 2 months untangling that mess and had managed to recover nearly a year's worth of uncollected rent. This would be the same, just dirtier. By the time the sun started setting, Eliza had made a list of 37 people or businesses that owed William Kowalski money. The amounts ranged from $2 for a sack of flour to $85 for a running tab that had been accumulating since 1887. The total came to $462. Kowalski nearly fell over when she showed him the number. "That can't be right." "It's right. I checked it 3 times. Eliza pointed to the ledger. "You've been extending credit to half the town and never following up. Some of these people probably forgot they even owed you anything. $462, Kowalski repeated, like he was trying to convince himself it was real. If I had that money, you could restock, hire help, maybe even fix this place up. If I had that money, I could leave. Eliza looked at him. You want to leave? I want to not be drowning anymore. Kowalski took off his spectacles and rubbed his eyes. But even if you're right, even if folks owe me that much, there's no way you'll collect it. These people are broke, Miss Hartwell. They don't have money. That's why they ain't paid. Some of them don't have money, Eliza corrected, but some of them just haven't been asked, and some of them have been taking advantage of you because you stopped trying. You sound awfully confident for someone who just got swindled into coming to a ghost town. Eliza smiled, though it didn't reach her eyes. Maybe that's exactly why I'm confident. I've got nothing left to lose. That night, Eliza slept in a small room at the back of Kowalski's store that he used for storage. It wasn't much, just a cot, a barrel for a table, and a window that didn't quite close all the way. But it was a roof over her head, and that was more than she'd had a few hours ago. She lay awake for a long time, listening to the wind rattle the loose boards outside and thinking about how spectacularly her life had gone wrong. She'd been so sure that coming west was the right choice, that Marcus Hale's letters were the answer to a prayer she'd been praying since her mother died, that somewhere out there was a place where she could be more than just a woman scrubbing floors and counting pennies and waiting for her life to start. But there was no Marcus Hale, no ranch, no future, just a dying town and a con man's lies. Eliza closed her eyes and felt something hot and angry burning in her chest. She'd been foolish, naive, desperate, and Jacob Hale had taken advantage of that desperation the way men always took advantage of desperate women. But she was still here, and she was done being foolish. The next morning, Eliza started collecting debts. Her first stop was the livery stable on the east edge of town, a sagging structure that looked like it might collapse if you sneezed too hard. According to Kowalski's records, the owner, a man named Samuel Briggs, owed $32 for feed and supplies dating back to early 1888. Eliza knocked on the stable door. No answer. She knocked again, louder this time. A voice came from inside. We're closed. Mr. Briggs? My name is Eliza Hartwell. I'm working for William Kowalski. I need to speak with you about your account. I don't got time for this. I'll only take a moment. I said we're closed. Eliza tried the door. It was unlocked. She pushed it open and stepped inside. The stable was dark and smelled like horses and old hay. There were 4 stalls, but only 2 had horses in them, both of them thin and tired-looking. At the far end, a man was mucking out a stall with the kind of angry, violent movements that suggested he was imagining the manure was something else he wanted to destroy. Mr. Briggs? The man stopped and turned around. He was probably in his 40s, broad-shouldered, with a face that had been weathered by years of outdoor work and disappointment. His clothes were patched in multiple places. His boots had holes. You the woman who just got off the stage yesterday? Yes. Then you got about as much sense as the last fool woman who came through here. Turn around and go back before this town eats you alive. I'm here about your account with Kowalski's store. Briggs went back to shoveling. Don't got no money. Come back never. According to Mr. Kowalski's records, you owe $32. According to my records, Kowalski can go straight to hell. I don't owe him nothing. Oh, Eliza stepped closer. His ledger shows purchases dating back to... I know what his ledger shows. Briggs slammed the shovel into the ground. You think I don't remember? But that was when I had horses to board. That was when ranchers came through here regular-like. Now I got 2 animals, and one of 'em's about to die. And Kowalski wants his money? Tell him to get in line behind everybody else I owe. Eliza looked around the stable. It was falling apart, but it was still standing. And there were tools. A decent saddle hanging on the wall, a workbench with leather-working equipment, a forge that looked like it hadn't been used in months but was still functional. When's the last time you shoed a horse? She asked. Briggs frowned. What? When's the last time someone brought you a horse to shoe? Why the hell does that matter? Because I'm trying to figure out how you're going to pay what you owe. Briggs laughed, a bitter, ugly sound. I ain't paying nothing. Can't you see that? This place is done. I'm done. Silver Creek is done. You want money from a corpse? Go dig up the cemetery. Eliza crossed her arms. You're not dead yet, Mr. Briggs. Neither is this town. There are still ranchers out there who need horses shod. There are still people who need leather goods repaired. You've got the tools. You've got the skills. What you don't have is customers, because you've decided to sit here and rot instead of going out and finding work. Who the hell do you think you are coming in here and telling me, I think I'm someone who's owed money, and I think you're someone who'd rather feel sorry for himself than do something about his situation. So here's my offer. You start taking jobs again. Any jobs. I don't care if it's fixing a broken bridle or shoeing a mule. You work, you earn, and you pay off your debt in installments. 10% of whatever you make goes to Kowalski until your account is clear. Briggs stared at her like she'd just suggested he fly to the moon. And if I say no, then I'll tell every rancher and trader within 50 miles that Samuel Briggs doesn't honor his debts. Good luck getting any business after that. The silence stretched between them, taut as a wire. Finally, Briggs said, You're a real piece of work, lady. So I've been told. He spat into the dirt. Fine, 10%, but I ain't promising nothing. Fair enough. Eliza left the stable with an agreement that wasn't worth the paper it wasn't written on, but it was a start. Over the next 2 weeks, she visited every name on her list. Some people paid immediately, small amounts, but it was something. A rancher named Tom Millhouse gave her $8 in cash and 2 chickens. An old woman who ran a boarding house on the north side of town paid $6 and promised more next month. A merchant who'd been buying supplies from Kowalski without paying gave her a barrel of flour and 12 cans of peaches. Others fought her every step of the way. There was a miner named Frank Dutton who threatened to throw her off his property. There was a widow named Clara Hayes who cried and said she didn't have a cent to her name. There was a man named Pike, no first name, just Pike, who told her in very explicit terms what she could do with Kowalski's ledger. But Eliza didn't back down. She negotiated, she bargained, she made deals. She accepted payment in goods when cash wasn't available. She set up installment plans. She found out what people could actually afford and worked from there instead of demanding the impossible. And slowly, bit by bit, the money came in. By the end of the first month, Eliza had collected $118 in cash and goods worth another $40. William Kowalski looked at the money like it was a miracle. How did you do this? I asked. I asked too. They told me to go to hell. You asked like a man who expected to be told no, Eliza said. I asked like a woman who wouldn't take no for an answer. Kowalski counted the money again, as if it might disappear if he blinked. Then he reached into the cash box and pulled out $11.80, 10% of what she'd collected, and handed it to her. It was the most money Eliza had held in her hands in years. Thank you, Mr. Kowalski. You earned it. He paused. You could leave now, you know. You got enough for a stage ticket. Hell, you got enough for a train ticket if you're careful. Eliza looked at the money in her hand. He was right. She could leave. Go back east. Start over somewhere else. Try to forget that Silver Creek had ever happened. But then she looked around the store, which was cleaner now, more organized, with newly restocked shelves, and she thought about Samuel Briggs, who'd started taking jobs again and had actually shod 2 horses last week. She thought about Tom Millhouse, who told her he was thinking about buying more cattle because maybe, just maybe, Silver Creek wasn't completely dead yet. She thought about the smoke she'd seen rising from the edge of town on her first day here, the smoke that had told her someone was still fighting. I'm not leaving, Eliza said. Kowalski frowned. Why not? Because I'm not done yet. That night, Eliza walked to the edge of town where she'd seen the smoke. There was a house there, or something like a house. It was more of a cabin, really, built from rough timber and standing alone in a clearing with nothing around it but empty grassland and the distant shapes of mountains against the darkening sky. Smoke rose from the chimney. A horse stood in a small corral beside the cabin, and there was a vegetable garden that looked like someone actually cared about it. This was where he lived, Cole Dawson. Eliza had heard the name from Kowalski, the man who used to run cattle with Marcus Hale before Marcus died. The man who'd stayed in Silver Creek even when everyone else left. The man who'd told Kowalski, in no uncertain terms, that he didn't need help, didn't want company, and would prefer if the world just left him the hell alone. Eliza had seen him a few times from a distance. A tall figure in a worn coat and a hat pulled low, moving through town like a ghost, never stopping to talk, never making eye contact. Kowalski said he came into the store once a month for supplies, paid in cash, and left without saying more than 3 words. Eliza wasn't sure why she'd walked all the way out here. Maybe because she was curious about the man who'd refused to give up on Silver Creek. Maybe because she wanted to see if there was anyone else in this dying town who still had fight left in them. Or maybe because she was tired of being alone. She stopped at the edge of the property, suddenly unsure. This was stupid. She didn't know this man. He didn't know her. He'd probably tell her to leave, and he'd be right to do it. But before she could turn around, the cabin door opened, and Cole Dawson stepped out. He was taller than she'd thought, well over 6 feet, with broad shoulders and the kind of build that came from years of hard physical work. His face was weathered and hard, with a jaw that looked like it had been carved from stone and eyes that were cold and guarded. He wore a gun on his hip, not for show, for use. He looked at Eliza the way you'd look at a coyote that had wandered too close to the henhouse. "You lost." His voice was low and rough, like gravel. "No." "Then what are you doing on my property?" Eliza lifted her chin. "My name is Eliza Hartwell. I've been working for William Kowalski, helping him collect debts and reorganize his accounts. I heard you used to run cattle with Marcus Hale, and I thought, you thought wrong." "I haven't even told you what I thought yet." "Don't need to. The answer's no." "I haven't asked a question. Lady, I don't care what you're selling or what you need or what kind of help you want. I'm not interested." Cole Dawson turned to go back inside. "I need a job," Eliza said quickly. He stopped, turned back around, looked at her like she'd just said something in a foreign language. "What?" I need work. Real work. Kowalski's store is getting back on its feet, but it's not enough. I'm good with numbers. I'm good with organizing things. I can read and write. I don't need help. Everyone needs help. Not from you." The words stung more than Eliza expected. She'd been rejected plenty of times in her life, but something about the casual cruelty in Cole Dawson's voice hit harder. "Why not from me?" "Because you're going to be gone in a month, just like the last woman who showed up here thinking she could fix this place. And I don't got time to waste training someone who's just going to run away when things get hard." "I'm not running away." "Everyone runs away from Silver Creek. It's what they do." Eliza took a step forward. "I came here because I thought I was going to marry Marcus Hale. But Marcus is dead, and his brother conned me, and I've got 17 cents and no way home. I'm not running away because I've got nowhere to run to. So maybe you don't need help, Mr. Dawson, but I need work. And from what I can see, you're the only person in this town who's actually still trying to build something instead of just waiting to die." Cole stared at her for a long moment. Then he said, "The answer's still no." And he went back inside and shut the door. Eliza stood there in the growing darkness, feeling like an idiot. What had she expected? That he'd welcome her with open arms? That he'd be impressed by her determination? That he'd see her as anything other than another desperate woman who didn't know when to quit? She turned and started walking back toward town. Behind her, the cabin's chimney smoke rose into the night sky, a signal that someone was still fighting, even if he wouldn't let anyone fight beside him. And Eliza thought, fine, I don't need you either. But she was lying, because the truth was, she'd seen something in Cole Dawson's eyes, something familiar. He wasn't just guarding his property. He was guarding himself. From hope. From disappointment. From the possibility that if he let someone in, they'd just leave him alone again. Eliza knew that feeling. She'd spent the last 3 years feeling it, and as she walked back into Silver Creek under a sky full of stars, she made herself a promise. She was going to prove Cole Dawson wrong. Not because she needed him to like her, but because she needed someone in this God-forsaken town to believe that staying wasn't the same thing as giving up, even if that someone was herself. The next 3 weeks passed in a blur of work that left Eliza's hands blistered and her back aching, but her pride intact. She'd proven William Kowalski wrong about the debts. Now she had to prove the rest of Silver Creek wrong about everything else. The problem was that collecting money was the easy part. The hard part was convincing people that Silver Creek was worth saving in the first place. Most mornings, Eliza woke before dawn in her cramped room behind Kowalski's store and spent an hour going over the accounts. She'd created a new system, one ledger for current transactions, another for outstanding debts, and a third for inventory. It wasn't fancy, but it worked. More importantly, it meant that for the first time in years, Kowalski actually knew what he had, what he owed, and what was owed to him. "You're making me look incompetent," he'd grumbled one morning, watching her reorganize his storeroom for the third time. "You were incompetent," Eliza had replied without looking up from the crate of canned goods she was sorting. "Now you're just disorganized. We'll work on that next." By mid-morning, she'd usually moved on to her real work, talking to people. Not collecting debts anymore, most of those were either paid or on payment plans, but something more ambitious, something that kept her awake at night with equal parts excitement and terror. She was trying to rebuild Silver Creek's economy. It sounded insane when she said it out loud, which was why she didn't say it out loud. But the more time she spent in the town, the more she realized that Silver Creek's problem wasn't lack of resources. It was lack of organization. Ranchers needed supplies but couldn't get them because the store was a mess. The store needed inventory but couldn't afford it because nobody paid their bills. Miners needed equipment but there was no one to repair it. The blacksmith, an ancient man named Otto who was barely hanging on, had the skills but no customers because everyone assumed he'd gone out of business. It was a town eating itself alive, one failed transaction at a time. So Eliza started connecting people. She told Tom Millhouse, the rancher who'd paid her with chickens, that Otto could repair his broken wagon wheel for half the price it would cost to have one shipped from Cheyenne. She convinced Samuel Briggs to partner with Otto, using the forge at the stable since Otto's own workshop was falling apart. She brokered a deal between Kowalski and a traveling merchant who came through once a month, negotiating better prices on bulk goods in exchange for guaranteed purchases. Small things, practical things. Things that didn't feel like miracles but added up to something that almost looked like hope. Not everyone appreciated her efforts. "You're meddling, Claire," Clara Hayes told her one afternoon. The widow was hanging laundry behind her boarding house, sheets that had seen better days, just like everything else in Silver Creek. "People don't like being told what to do." "I'm not telling anyone what to do," Eliza said. "I'm just suggesting that maybe if we worked together instead of separately, we'd all be better off." "That's meddling. That's common sense." Clara pinned another sheet to the line with more force than necessary. "You think you're going to save this town? You think you're special?" "I think I'm here. That already makes me different from everyone who left." "You'll leave too. They always do." Clara's voice cracked on the last word, and Eliza realized this wasn't really about her at all. This was about whoever Clara had lost when Silver Creek started dying. A husband, maybe. Or children who'd moved away and never looked back. Eliza didn't have an answer for that, so she just helped Clara hang the rest of the laundry in silence, and when they were done, Clara said, "I got 2 rooms I could rent out. If anyone ever comes through here again." "How much would you charge, $3 a week, includes breakfast." "That's a good rate. I'll let people know." Clara nodded, not quite meeting Eliza's eyes. "You do that." It wasn't much, but it was the first time Clara Hayes had admitted that maybe, possibly, Silver Creek might have a future worth preparing for. The person Eliza couldn't crack was Cole Dawson. She saw him in town once a week, usually on Thursdays, when he came in to buy supplies from Kowalski's store. He moved through the streets like a man who wanted to be invisible, hat pulled low, shoulders hunched, never making eye contact. He'd load up his saddlebags with flour, coffee, beans, ammunition, and whatever else he needed, pay in cash, and leave without saying more than thanks to Kowalski. Eliza tried talking to him exactly once more. It was a Thursday morning, and she was restocking shelves when Cole walked in. She waited until he'd gathered his supplies and was heading toward the counter before stepping in front of him. "Mr. Dawson." He stopped, looked at her with those cold, guarded eyes, said nothing. "I wanted to apologize for bothering you at your home. That was inappropriate." Still nothing. "But I also wanted to say that I'm still looking for work. If you change your mind, I won't. You know where to find me." Cole shifted his weight, and for a moment Eliza thought he was going to walk around her without another word. But instead he said, "You're wasting your time here. Maybe. But it's my time to waste. This town is dead. You can dress it up all you want, organize Kowalski's store, collect a few debts, but that don't change what it is. You're just making it take longer to die. Or maybe I'm giving it a reason to live. Cole's jaw tightened. You can't save something that don't want to be saved. I'm not trying to save the town, Mr. Dawson. I'm trying to save myself. The town's just what I have to work with. He stared at her for a long moment, and Eliza couldn't read his expression at all. It was like looking at a wall that had been built specifically to keep people out. Finally, he stepped around her, paid Kowalski, and left. You're really determined to get him to like you, aren't you? Kowalski said when Cole was gone. I don't care if he likes me. I care that he's the only person in this town who's still actually working. If I could figure out what he's doing that's keeping him here, maybe I could apply it to everyone else. What he's doing is called stubbornness. Same thing that's keeping me here. Kowalski counted out Cole's payment and added it to the cash box. Difference is Cole's got land and cattle and skills. He don't need anybody. The rest of us, we're just too broke or too old or too tired to leave. That's not true. Samuel Briggs isn't broke anymore. He's making decent money shoeing horses. Tom Millhouse is talking about expanding his herd. Otto and Samuel are working together. Things are changing. Small things don't mean nothing in the long run. Eliza wanted to argue, but she was interrupted by the sound of horses outside. Multiple horses, moving fast. Kowalski's face went pale. That ain't good. They went to the window and looked out. 4 men on horseback were riding down the main street, kicking up dust. They weren't moving like travelers passing through. They were moving like men who had business to conduct and didn't care who got in their way. Who are they? Eliza asked. Trouble. Kowalski moved away from the window. They come through every few months, take what they want, threaten whoever argues, and move on. Used to be the sheriff would run them off, but we ain't had a sheriff in 2 years. So what do? We stay inside and wait for them to leave. But Eliza had already seen where the riders were stopping, right in front of the stable where Samuel Briggs worked. She was out the door before Kowalski could stop her. Miss Hartwell, don't... But she was already running. She reached the stable just as one of the men was dismounting. He was tall and thin, with a face that looked like it had been carved by someone who specialized in making things ugly. He wore 2 guns and a smile that made Eliza's stomach turn. Briggs, the man called out. Get your ass out here. Samuel Briggs emerged from the stable, and Eliza could see his hands shaking. Mr. Kane, I wasn't expecting... You weren't expecting me to come collect? That's funny, Briggs, because I sure as hell was expecting you to pay what you owe. Kane gestured to his companions. 3 men who looked like they'd been picked specifically for their ability to intimidate. You remember the terms of our agreement? I remember. I just need more time. You had time. 3 months' worth. Now you're going to pay, or we're going to take payment out of your hide. Liza stepped forward before her brain could catch up with her body. Excuse me. All 4 men turned to look at her. Kane's smile widened. Well now, who's this? My name is Eliza Hartwell. I'm Mr. Briggs' business associate. I handle his accounts. His business associate? Kane laughed. Briggs, when did you get so fancy that you needed a business associate, and such a pretty one, too? Briggs shot Eliza a look that clearly said, what the hell are you doing? But she ignored him. How much does Mr. Briggs owe you? $60, plus interest. What's the interest rate? Kane's smile faded slightly. What's it matter to you? If I'm handling his accounts, I need to know the terms of all his debts. What's the rate? 5% monthly. Eliza's stomach dropped. 5% monthly compounding was extortion. If Briggs had borrowed $60 3 months ago, he now owed nearly $70, and the debt would keep growing. That's a usurious rate, Mr. Kane. That's the cost of doing business with me, sweetheart. Now, you going to pay up, or do we need to have a different conversation? I'm going to propose an alternative arrangement. Kane looked at his men. They looked back at him. Then they all laughed, not because it was funny, but because they'd found something to amuse themselves with before the violence started. An alternative arrangement, Kane repeated. I'm listening. Mr. Briggs will pay you $70, the principal plus interest accrued. But he'll pay in installments. $20 now and $25 each month for the next 2 months. And why would I agree to that? Because if you hurt Mr. Briggs, you'll never see your money. He's a skilled blacksmith and farrier. He's currently working with Otto the blacksmith to provide services to every ranch and mine within 50 miles. He's earning good money, but if you break his hands, he can't work. And if he can't work, you don't get paid. Kane stepped closer to Eliza. He smelled like sweat and tobacco and something else she couldn't identify, but instinctively recoiled from. You got a smart mouth on you, girl. I've been told that before. Usually don't end well for smart-mouthed girls. Eliza's heart was hammering so hard she could feel it in her throat, but she kept her voice steady. Mr. Kane, you're a businessman. I'm offering you a business solution. You get your money with interest, and Mr. Briggs keeps his ability to earn. Everyone wins. Or I just take what I want right now. You could, but what you'd get is whatever's in Mr. Briggs's pockets, which I'm guessing is maybe $10 at most, and the satisfaction of beating up a man in front of his shop. What you wouldn't get is the $60+ you're actually owed. Seems like a poor trade. The silence that followed felt like it lasted for hours. Finally, Kane said, 20 now, 25 next month, 25 the month after. If he misses a payment, the deal's off, and I take it out of his hide. And yours. Agreed. But I want a receipt showing the payment terms. Kane laughed again, but this time it sounded almost genuine. You got balls, I'll give you that. He turned to Briggs. You better hope your business associate here knows what she's doing, because if you miss a payment, I'm coming for both of you. Briggs handed over $20 with shaking hands. Kane counted it twice, then scrawled something on a piece of paper and shoved it at Eliza. 1 month, don't forget. Then he and his men mounted up and rode out of town, leaving dust and the smell of danger in their wake. The moment they were gone, Briggs rounded on Eliza. What the hell was that? That was me keeping you from getting beaten to death. I didn't ask for your help. You would have if you'd had time to think about it. You got no idea what you just did. Kane don't forget, and he sure as hell don't forgive. Now he knows who you are, and if I miss a payment, then don't miss a payment. Eliza's hands were shaking now that the danger had passed, but she refused to show it. You're making money, Samuel. Between the horseshoeing and the work with Otto, you can earn $25 in a month. I've seen your accounts. What if I can't? What if business slows down? Then we'll figure it out. But right now you're alive and unbroken. That's worth something. Briggs stared at her for a long moment. Then he sat down heavily on a barrel and put his head in his hands. You're crazier than I thought. Probably. Kane's going to be a problem for both of us now. Let me worry about Kane. That's real noble of you, Miss Hartwell, but you don't know what you're dealing with. Men like that prey on fear, Eliza interrupted. They're counting on everyone being too scared to stand up to them. Well, I'm not scared. Or at least, I'm more scared of doing nothing than doing something. That wasn't entirely true. She was terrified, but she'd learned a long time ago that fear and action weren't mutually exclusive. By the time Eliza got back to Kowalski's store, half the town had heard about what happened. William Kowalski looked like he wanted to lecture her. Otto wanted to thank her, and Clara Hayes just stared at her like she'd grown a second head. You're going to get yourself killed, Clara said. Maybe, but at least I'll die doing something useful. That's the dumbest thing I ever heard. Eliza was too tired to argue. She went to her room, closed the door, and sat on her cot with her back against the wall. Her hands were still shaking. Her heart was still racing, and she couldn't stop replaying the moment when Kane had stepped close to her, his eyes promising violence if she pushed too far. She'd pushed anyway, because the alternative was watching Samuel Briggs get beaten, possibly killed, over a debt he couldn't pay. And Eliza had spent too much of her life watching bad things happen to people who didn't deserve it. She wasn't going to watch anymore. That night, there was a knock on her door. Eliza opened it, expecting Kowalski, but instead found Cole Dawson standing in the narrow hallway, hat in hand, looking deeply uncomfortable. Mr. Dawson, I heard what you did today. News travels fast. It's a small town. Everyone knows everything. He shifted his weight, still not quite looking at her. That was a stupid thing you did. So everyone keeps telling me. Kane's dangerous. You put yourself in his sights for no good reason. I had a reason. Samuel Briggs didn't deserve to get hurt over a debt. Briggs is a grown man. He can handle his own problems. Clearly he couldn't. That's why I stepped in. Cole finally met her eyes. You think you're some kind of hero? No, I think I'm someone who couldn't stand by and watch. They stood there in the doorway, the silence stretching between them. Eliza waited for him to say whatever he'd come to say and leave. Instead, he said, I got work, if you still want it. Eliza's breath caught. What? Work. At my place, I need someone to help with the books, organize the accounts, maybe help with some of the buying and selling. It ain't glamorous and it don't pay much, but it's steady. Why now? You turned me down twice, too. Cole looked away again, his jaw tight. Because I watched you stand up to Kane today, and I realized something. You ain't gonna leave. You're too stubborn. And if you're gonna stay in Silver Creek and piss off dangerous men, you might as well do it while earning a decent wage. It wasn't a compliment. It wasn't even close to an apology for turning her away before, but it was an offer. And Eliza wasn't in a position to turn down offers. What kind of books do you need organized? Cattle records, buy and sell transactions, debts owed to me, debts I owe. It's a mess. I've been meaning to sort it out for years but never had the time. What's the pay? $5 a week, plus meals when you're working. It was more than she was making with Kowalski, more than she'd made in Boston, even. When do I start? Tomorrow, dawn. I'll be there. Cole put his hat back on, nodded once, and turned to leave. But Eliza stopped him. Mr. Dawson, why didn't you step in today? When Kane showed up. He paused in the doorway, his back to her. Because it wasn't my fight. But you knew what was happening. You knew Kane was dangerous. I knew. I also knew that getting involved would just make things worse. That's how it works out here, Miss Hartwell. You fight one battle and 10 more show up. Eventually you learn to pick which ones matter. And Samuel Briggs didn't matter? Cole turned around slowly, and for the first time Eliza saw something other than cold distance in his eyes. She saw pain. They all mattered once, he said quietly. Every person in this town. Every fight. Every problem. I tried to help. Tried to fix things. And all it got me was more problems and more people leaving when things got hard. So yeah, I stopped fighting other people's battles. Because nobody fights yours when you need them. I would. Cole laughed. A short, bitter sound. You don't even know me. I know you're still here. That's enough. He stared at her for a long moment, like he was trying to figure out if she was naive or brave or just plain crazy. Then he shook his head and left without another word. Eliza closed the door and leaned against it, her mind racing. She'd just gotten a job working for the most difficult man in Silver Creek, a man who'd made it clear he didn't believe in hope or help or second chances, a man who looked at her like she was a problem waiting to happen. But he'd offered her work anyway. That had to mean something. The next morning, Eliza arrived at Cole's property just as the sun was breaking over the mountains. The air was cold and sharp, and her breath came out in white puffs as she walked up to the cabin. Cole was already outside, loading supplies onto a wagon. He barely glanced at her. You're late. You said dawn. The sun's barely up. Dawn means when there's enough light to work by. That was 10 minutes ago. He gestured toward the cabin. Books are inside, kitchen table. Sort through them and tell me what I'm dealing with. Eliza went inside. The cabin was exactly what she'd expected. Sparse, functional, and meticulously clean. There was a wood stove, a table with 2 chairs, a shelf with a few books, and a narrow bed in the corner. No decorations, no personal touches. Nothing that suggested anyone actually lived here instead of just survived here. On the table was a stack of papers that made Kowalski's mess look organized. Eliza sat down and got to work. 3 hours later, she had a headache and a growing sense of disbelief. Cole Dawson wasn't broke. Not even close. According to the receipts and transaction records scattered across the table, he'd been buying and selling cattle for years, small numbers, but steady. He had contracts with ranchers in 3 different territories. He owned more land than she'd realized, and he was owed nearly $600 by various buyers who'd either forgotten to pay or were taking advantage of the fact that Cole never followed up. $600. That was enough to hire help, buy better equipment, expand the herd. Hell, it was enough to leave Silver Creek entirely and start over somewhere else. But instead, Cole was out here alone, barely scraping by, letting people steal from him through negligence. When he came back inside for lunch, if you could call a hunk of bread and some dried meat lunch, Eliza had her findings ready. You're owed $618. Cole stopped mid-bite. What? $618 from 12 different buyers over the last 3 years. Some of them probably forgot they owed you. Others are definitely taking advantage. That can't be right. I checked 3 times. It's right. Eliza pushed the ledger across the table. You're not broke, Mr. Dawson. You're just bad at collecting what you're owed. Cole looked at the numbers like they were written in a foreign language. I didn't realize it was that much. That's because you never organized your records. You just kept the receipts and figured you'd deal with it later. Well, later is now. And you think you can collect it? I collected most of Kowalski's debts. I can collect yours too. Cole set down his bread. These ain't small debts to neighbors, Miss Hartwell. Some of these buyers are in Cheyenne. Some are in Colorado. You can't just walk up and ask for money. Then I'll write letters, send invoices, track them down if I have to. But I'm getting you that money. Why? The question caught Eliza off guard. What do you mean, why? Because you earned it. Because people owe you. Because you think if you help me, I'll help you rebuild the town. Cole's voice was flat. That's what this is about, right? You're trying to save Silver Creek, and you figure if you can get me on your side, it'll make the rest easier. Eliza felt her face flush. Not because he was wrong, but because he was right, and because hearing it said out loud made it sound calculating and cold. That's not, don't lie to me. I've seen the way you operate. You're smart. You figure out what people need, and you use it to get what you want. There ain't nothing wrong with that. It's good business. But don't pretend this is about me. It's about you, just like everything else you're doing. Eliza stood up, anger flaring hot in her chest. You're right. It is about me. I'm stuck here, Mr. Dawson. I got nowhere to go and no way to get there. So yeah, I'm trying to make something out of Silver Creek because it's the only option I have. But you know what? Even if I had a choice, I'd still be here. Because at least I'm trying. At least I'm doing something instead of sitting around feeling sorry for myself and letting the world take advantage of me. Cole's expression didn't change. You done? No, I'm not done. You want to know why I'm helping you? Because you're the only person in this town who still has a chance to do something real. You got land, you got cattle, you got skills, and you're wasting all of it because you've decided that trying means losing. Well, maybe it does, but not trying. Definitely means losing. So you can sit here and guard yourself and your property and your pain, or you can let me help you collect what you're owed and actually build something. Your choice. She grabbed her coat and headed for the door. Miss Hartwell? She stopped but didn't turn around. Be back tomorrow, same time, and bring writing supplies. We're going to need to send a lot of letters. Eliza turned around slowly. Cole was still sitting at the table, looking at the ledger like it was a puzzle he'd just figured out how to solve. Does this mean... It means I'm hiring you to collect my debts. Don't read more into it than that. But something had shifted. Eliza could feel it. Not trust, not yet, but maybe the beginning of it, or at least the possibility. She nodded. Tomorrow, dawn. When there's light to work by. When there's light to work by, she repeated. And for the first time since arriving in Silver Creek, Eliza allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, she wasn't fighting alone anymore. Over the next 6 weeks, Eliza learned more about Cole Dawson than she'd learned about any person in her entire life, and most of it came from what he didn't say rather than what he did. She learned that he woke up before the sun every single day, not because he was disciplined, but because he couldn't sleep past 4 in the morning. She learned that he ate the same thing for breakfast every day, coffee so strong it could strip paint, and whatever bread was left from the day before. She learned that he never talked about his past unless directly asked, and even then his answers were short enough to fit on a postage stamp. But she also learned that he was meticulous about his work. Every fence was mended properly. Every tool was cleaned and stored in exactly the right place. Every cow in his small herd had a name, though he pretended not to care about them. And his handwriting, when he finally sat down to help her draft collection letters, was surprisingly neat. the kind of careful penmanship that suggested someone had once cared enough to teach him properly. They worked in a rhythm that surprised them both. Eliza would arrive just after dawn, and they'd spend the morning going through records. Cole would explain the context behind each transaction, which buyer was reliable, which one needed pressure, which one was likely to ignore letters entirely. Then Eliza would draft the correspondence while Cole did his ranch work, and in the afternoon they'd review everything together before he rode into town to post the letters. It wasn't friendship. Cole made that clear through his continued distance and his habit of leaving rooms when conversations got too personal. But it was something. A working relationship built on mutual need and grudging respect. The first payment came back after 3 weeks. Cole had been out checking fence lines when Eliza heard a horse approaching. She looked up from the ledger she'd been updating to see a rider, a weathered man in his 50s with a cattleman's build, pulling up to the cabin. "Help you?" Eliza called out, stepping onto the porch. The man dismounted, holding an envelope. "I'm looking for Cole Dawson. Got a payment for him." Eliza's heart jumped. "I can take that. I manage his accounts." The man looked skeptical. "You sure? This is $75. Don't usually hand that over to just anybody. I'm Eliza Hartwell. Mr. Dawson hired me specifically to handle his financial records. You can wait for him if you'd like, but he won't be back until evening." The man considered this, then shrugged and handed over the envelope. "Tell Dawson that James Pritchard sends his apologies. I honest to God forgot about that transaction from last year. Soon as I got his letter, I knew he was right. So there's the 75 plus an extra 10 for the trouble. $85. Eliza tried to keep her voice steady. "I'll make sure he gets it, and I'll send you a receipt." "Much appreciated, miss." Pritchard tipped his hat and rode off, leaving Eliza standing on the porch, holding more money than most people in Silver Creek saw in 3 months. When Cole returned that evening, dusty and tired from a day of hard work, Eliza met him at the corral with the envelope. "What's this?" "James Pritchard came by, said he forgot about the debt and wanted to make it right. $75 plus 10 extra. Cole took the envelope and stared at it like it might explode. Then he opened it, counted the money twice, and looked at Eliza with an expression she couldn't quite read. "You actually did it. I told you I would." "Yeah, but I didn't." He trailed off, still looking at the money. "I didn't think it would work." "Why not?" "Because nothing works." "Not anymore. Not in Silver Creek." Cole folded the envelope and put it in his coat pocket. "How many more letters did we send?" 11. This was the first response, but it probably won't be the last. She was right. Over the next month, 5 more payments came in. Some were full amounts. Some were partial with promises to pay the rest later. One buyer sent an angry letter saying Cole was a bastard for waiting 3 years to collect, but he included $40 anyway. By the end of October, Eliza had recovered over $300 of the $600 Cole was owed. The difference it made was immediate and visible. Cole hired a drifter named Ray to help with ranch work. He bought lumber to repair his barn. He purchased 10 head of cattle from a seller in Cheyenne who was liquidating his herd. And for the first time since Eliza had known him, Cole started talking about the future in terms that weren't purely about survival. "I'm thinking about expanding." "But," he said one afternoon while they were reviewing accounts, "there's land south of here that borders my property. Owner died last year and his widow's looking to sell. If I could get it for the right price." "How much land?" 160 acres. Good grazing. Creek runs through it." "How much does she want?" $400. Eliza did the math in her head. With the money they'd already collected and the payment still outstanding, Cole could afford it, barely. But it would leave him with almost nothing in reserve. "That's a risk," she said carefully. "Everything's a risk." "True. But this is a big one. If you put all your money into land and something goes wrong, drought, disease, another bad winter, you won't have anything to fall back on." Cole leaned back in his chair, studying her. "You saying I shouldn't do it?" "I'm saying you should think about it carefully. Make sure it's the right move." "And what would the right move look like to you?" Eliza hesitated. This was the kind of conversation that could go wrong fast. But Cole was asking her opinion, which meant he actually wanted to hear it. The right move would be to buy the land, but not alone. Find a partner. Someone who can put up half the money in exchange for a percentage of the profits. That way you share the risk. And who exactly would partner with me? Everyone in Silver Creek is broke. Not everyone. Tom Millhouse has been doing well, so has Samuel Briggs. And there are ranchers in the surrounding territories who might be interested if you presented it as an investment opportunity. Cole shook his head. I don't do partners. Every partnership I ever had ended badly. Because of the partners or because of you? The question hung in the air between them, sharp and dangerous. Eliza immediately regretted asking it, but instead of getting angry, Cole just looked tired. Both, he said finally. I had a partner once, my brother-in-law. We were going to build something real together. But then my wife died, and he left, and everything fell apart. So yeah, I don't do partners anymore. I'd rather struggle alone than get abandoned again. It was the most personal thing Cole had ever told her, and Eliza didn't know what to do with it. She wanted to say something comforting, but comfort felt like a lie. So instead, she just said, I'm sorry that happened to you. Cole stood up and walked to the window, his back to her. Don't be. It taught me something important. You can't rely on people. They'll let you down every time. Not every time. Often enough that it ain't worth the risk. Eliza closed the ledger and joined him at the window. Outside, the sun was setting over the mountains, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple that were almost painful in their beauty. I understand why you feel that way, she said quietly. But if you never take the risk, you'll never build anything bigger than what you can do alone. And what you can do alone has limits. Maybe I'm fine with limits. Are you? Cole didn't answer, but the fact that he'd even mentioned buying more land suggested that no, he wasn't fine with limits. He just didn't know how to get past them without getting hurt again. They stood there in silence as the light faded, and Eliza realized something that made her chest ache. Cole Dawson wasn't afraid of hard work or failure or even death. He was afraid of hope, because hope required vulnerability, and vulnerability was the thing that had destroyed him before. The conversation about the land purchase didn't come up again for another week, but when it did, it came from an unexpected direction. Eliza was in town, picking up supplies from Kowalski's store, when Tom Millhouse approached her. Miss Hartwell, got a minute? Of course. Millhouse looked uncomfortable, like he was about to ask for something he wasn't sure he should ask for. I heard Cole Dawson's looking to buy the Henderson property. News traveled impossibly fast in Silver Creek. Where'd you hear that? Otto mentioned it, said Cole was asking about the land survey. Look, I don't mean to pry into Cole's business, but if he's serious about that purchase, I might be interested in going in on it with him. Eliza kept her face neutral. Why? It's because that land connects to my property on the east side. If Cole buys it, and we could work out some kind of shared grazing arrangement, it would benefit both of us. Plus, I got some money saved up. Been looking for a way to invest it that ain't just sitting in a jar under my bed. Have you talked to Cole about this? That's the thing. I don't know how to approach him. Cole ain't exactly approachable, but you work with him. You think he'd even consider it? Eliza thought about her conversation with Cole about partnerships and how he'd shut down the idea immediately. But she also thought about the fact that he'd mentioned the land purchase at all, which meant some part of him was willing to imagine a bigger future. I can mention it to him, she said carefully, but I can't promise anything. Cole makes his own decisions. That's all I'm asking. Just let him know I'm interested. If he says no, that's fine, but if he's open to it... Millhouse shrugged. Could be good for both of us. When Eliza brought it up with Cole that afternoon, his reaction was exactly what she'd expected. No. You didn't even let me finish explaining. Don't need to. The answer's no. Tom Millhouse is a good rancher. He's got money to invest, and the land he owns connects to the Henderson property, which means you'd have access to... I said no. Eliza set down the pen she'd been holding. Why? Because I don't want a partner. You already have a partner. Me. I'm managing your books, collecting your debts, helping you make business decisions. That's a partnership. That's different. You work for me. I pay you. And Tom would invest with you. You'd share the profits. It's the same principle, just scaled up. Cole stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. It ain't the same, and you know it. When you work for me, if things go wrong, I fire you and we're done. When you partner with someone, you're stuck with them. And when they decide to leave or give up or just stop caring, you're the one left holding the mess. Or you build something together that neither of you could build alone. Or you lose everything because you trusted someone you shouldn't have. They stared at each other across the table, and Eliza could see the wall going back up, the same wall that had been there the first time she'd met him, the wall that said this far and no further. But she'd gotten past that wall once before. She could do it again. Cole, I'm not saying you have to partner with Tom Milhouse. I'm saying you should at least think about it. Meet with him, hear what he has to say, make an informed decision instead of just shutting down every possibility because you're scared. I ain't scared. Then prove it. The words were out before Eliza could stop them, and she immediately knew she'd pushed too hard. Cole's jaw tightened, and for a moment she thought he was going to order her off his property and tell her not to come back. Instead, he grabbed his coat and hat. I'm going into town. Don't be here when I get back. He left without another word, and Eliza sat alone in the cabin, wondering if she'd just destroyed the one working relationship she'd managed to build in Silver Creek. But when she showed up the next morning at dawn, Cole was waiting for her on the porch. I talked to Milhouse last night. Eliza's heart jumped. And I told him I'd think about it. He's drawing up a proposal. We're meeting next week to go over the details. Cole's voice was flat, carefully empty of emotion. You were right. I should at least hear what he has to say. That's good. Don't get excited. I ain't promising nothing. I know. Cole looked at her for a long moment, and something in his expression softened, just barely, just enough to notice. You're pushy, you know that? I've been told. It's annoying. Also been told that. But Cole hesitated, like the next words were physically difficult to say. But maybe it's what I needed. Someone pushy enough to make me consider things I wouldn't consider on my own. It wasn't a thank you. It wasn't even close. But coming from Cole Dawson, it felt like one. The meeting with Tom Milhouse happened the following Thursday, and Eliza attended as Cole's business advisor, a role she'd somehow acquired without either of them formally acknowledging it. They met at Kowalski's store because it was neutral ground and had a table big enough to spread out papers. Milhouse brought a handwritten proposal that was surprisingly thorough. He'd thought through the logistics, the cost sharing, the profit splits, even the contingency plans if things went wrong. Cole read through it twice without saying a word. Then he set it down and looked at Milhouse. 60-40 split. I put in 60% of the purchase price. I get 60% of the profits. I was thinking 50-50. You were thinking wrong. It's my land that borders the Henderson property, my cattle operation that will do most of the work. You're investing money, which is valuable, but I'm investing time and labor and expertise. 60-40. Milhouse considered this. 60-40 on the land purchase, but 50-50 on any cattle we run on the shared grazing areas. Deal! They shook hands, and just like that, Cole Dawson had his first business partner in years. Eliza watched the whole thing with a mix of pride and relief. This wasn't just about the land purchase. This was about Cole taking a step toward trusting someone again. It was a small step, and a cautious one, but it was movement. After Milhouse left, Cole turned to Eliza. You look smug. I'm not smug. You're definitely smug. You got that look like you just won something. Maybe I did. This don't mean you were right about everything. Just about this one thing. I'll take it. Cole almost smiled. Almost. Come on. We got work to do if I'm going to buy 160 acres of land and not go broke in the process. They spent the rest of the day reorganizing Cole's finances to accommodate the land purchase. It was tight, tighter than Eliza was comfortable with, but it was doable, especially if the rest of his outstanding debts came through, which she was confident they would. As they worked, Eliza noticed something different in Cole's demeanor. He was still quiet, still guarded, but there was an energy there that hadn't been present before, like someone had opened a window in a room that had been closed up too long. You're thinking about the future, Eliza said. What? You've been talking about expansion plans, about what you'll do with the new land, about growing the herd. You're thinking past survival. Cole didn't deny it. Maybe. That's good. Or it's dangerous. Thinking about the future means caring about the future, and caring means you got something to lose. You already have something to lose. You've just been pretending you don't. Cole set down his pen and looked at her with an expression that was hard to read. When'd you get so smart about people? I'm not smart about people. I'm just observant, and you're not as hard to read as you think you are. That's so. That's so. Then what am I thinking right now? Eliza met his eyes, and for a moment the air between them felt charged with something she couldn't quite name. You're thinking that you made a mistake. Hiring me. Letting me into your business. Trusting me with things you don't trust anyone with. And now you're worried because you can't unmake that mistake. And the only way forward is to keep trusting me, which terrifies you. Cole's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. Acknowledgement, maybe, or surprise that she'd seen through him so completely. Like I said, observant. Am I wrong? No. He picked up his pen again, his voice going carefully neutral. But you're also making the same mistake. You're trusting that Silver Creek can be saved, that these people will stick around, that all your effort won't just end up being wasted on a town that's already dead. And that terrifies you too, even if you won't admit it. Now it was Eliza's turn to feel exposed. Because he was right. She was terrified. Terrified that everything she was building would collapse, that Silver Creek would die anyway, and she'd be left with nothing but the memory of trying and failing. Maybe we're both idiots, she said finally. Maybe. Cole went back to his calculations. But at least we're idiots doing something instead of nothing. It was the closest thing to a moment of understanding they'd ever had, and Eliza held on to it like a lifeline. The land purchase went through 3 weeks later, and Silver Creek had its first piece of good news in years. Cole Dawson and Tom Milhouse had expanded their operations. It wasn't much by the standards of bigger towns, but in Silver Creek it felt like a declaration that maybe, possibly, the town had a future after all. Other changes followed. Samuel Briggs made his second payment to Kane on time, which meant he wasn't getting beaten and Eliza wasn't getting threatened. Otto and Samuel's partnership was producing steady work, and they'd taken on a young apprentice, a kid named Danny, whose family had been about to leave town but decided to stay when they realized there were jobs again. Clara Hayes rented out one of her rooms to a traveling merchant who decided Silver Creek was a good midpoint stop between Cheyenne and the mining towns to the north. Kowalski's store was actually making money for the first time in years, and people who'd been talking about leaving started talking about staying. It wasn't a miracle. It wasn't even close. But it was progress. The only problem was Kane. Eliza saw him twice more over the next month, always on the edges of town, always watching. He didn't approach her or Samuel directly, but his presence was a constant reminder that danger was never far away. And when Samuel made his third and final payment, Kane took the money and said, "Pleasure doing business with you, Briggs, but your girlfriend over there better watch herself. I don't like people who make me look soft." Samuel had told Eliza about it immediately, his face pale. "He's got it out for you now. I'm sorry. I never meant—" "It's not your fault," Eliza had said, though her stomach was churning with fear. Men like Kane always need someone to target. Better me than someone who can't handle it. But the truth was, she had no idea if she could handle it. She'd stood up to Kane once out of desperation and luck. If he came for her directly, she didn't have a plan. She just had stubbornness and the hope that he'd find easier prey somewhere else. She was wrong. It was a cold November morning when everything changed. Eliza was at Cole's cabin, finishing up some paperwork before heading back to town when she heard horses approaching fast. She looked out the window and her blood went cold. Kane and his men were riding straight toward the cabin. Cole was in the barn, and Eliza ran to get him, her heart hammering. "Cole! Kane's here!" Cole emerged from the barn, saw the riders, and his face went hard. "Get inside, lock the door." "What are you going to do?" "Whatever I have to." "Cole, inside, now." But Eliza didn't go inside. She couldn't. Because whatever was about to happen, she'd been the one to start it by standing up to Kane in the first place. She wasn't going to hide while Cole dealt with the consequences of her actions. Kane pulled up to the cabin and dismounted, his 3 men flanking him. He smiled when he saw Eliza standing on the porch. "Well, look who it is. The girl with the smart mouth. Been looking for you, Miss Hartwell." Cole stepped between them, his hand resting on his gun. "State your business and move on." Kane's smile widened. "My business is with her, not you, Dawson." unless you're making it your business. She works for me. That makes it my business. Interesting. Kane looked between them. So you're protecting her now? That's sweet. Real sweet. But see, I got a problem. Miss Hartwell here made me look bad in front of Samuel Briggs. Made it seem like I'd take payment plans instead of payment. And that kind of reputation? Well, it's bad for business. Briggs paid what he owed, Eliza said, her voice steadier than she felt. And he paid on time. You got your money. Yeah, but I didn't get respect. And respect is worth more than money out here. Kane took a step closer. So here's how this is going to work. You're going to pay me for the disrespect. Call it a tax on interfering in my business. $100 ought to cover it. Eliza's mind raced. $100 was money she didn't have. Money that would set Cole back if he paid it. But refusing would mean violence. She could see it in Kane's eyes, in the way his men were positioned, ready to move. Before she could answer, Cole said, "She ain't paying you nothing. You got a problem with how she handled Briggs's debt. That's between you and her. But it don't involve money." "Oh, but it does." Kane's voice went cold. "See, I make my living on reputation. When someone undermines that, they pay. That's how it works. So either she pays me $100 or I take it out of her some other way. Your choice, Dawson." The silence that followed felt like the moment before lightning strikes. Then Cole said, very quietly, "You threaten her again, and I'll kill you." It wasn't a bluff. Eliza could hear it in his voice, the absolute certainty of someone who'd made a decision and would see it through no matter the cost. Kane heard it too. His smile faltered just for a second. Then it came back, meaner than before. Big words for a man who's outnumbered 4-1. Won't matter if you're the first one dead. The tension stretched so tight, Eliza thought she might snap from it. She could see Cole's hand hovering near his gun, could see Kane's men tensing, ready to draw, could feel the entire situation balanced on the edge of violence that would end badly for everyone. And then she did the only thing she could think of. She stepped forward, putting herself between Cole and Kane. "I'll get you the money." "Eliza," Cole started. "I'll get you the money," she repeated, looking directly at Kane. "But I need time, 2 weeks. I don't have $100 right now, but I can get it." Kane studied her, trying to decide if she was lying. "How you going to get $100 in 2 weeks?" "That's my problem. Do we have a deal or not?" Another long silence. Then Kane laughed, a sound with no humor in it. "You got spine, girl." "I'll give you that." "All right, 2 weeks. You bring me $100 and we're square. You don't." He let the threat hang in the air, unfinished but clear. "I'll have it." "You better." Kane mounted his horse, his men following suit. 2 weeks, Miss Hartwell. Don't make me come looking for you." They rode off, leaving dust and the smell of danger behind them. The moment they were out of sight, Cole grabbed Eliza's arm and spun her around. "What the hell were you thinking?" "I was thinking that getting shot wasn't going to help anyone. You just promised him $100 you don't have." "I know." "So how are you going to get it?" Eliza pulled her arm free, her own anger rising to match his. "I don't know yet, but I'll figure it out. I always do. This ain't fixing Kowalski's books or collecting debts from ranchers who forgot to pay. This is Kane. If you don't come up with that money, then I'll deal with it. But at least we're both still alive right now, which we wouldn't be if you tried to shoot it out with 4 armed men." They stood there breathing hard, the adrenaline from the confrontation still coursing through them. Finally, Cole said, more quietly, "I would have shot him. If he touched you, I would have killed him, even if it meant dying myself." The words hit Eliza like a physical blow, not because they were violent, but because they were true. Cole would have died for her. Not because he loved her or even particularly liked her, but because she was under his protection now and he didn't break his word. "I know," she said softly. "That's why I stepped in, because I couldn't let you die for me over something I started." Cole looked away, his jaw tight. "You got 2 weeks to find $100. After that," he didn't finish the sentence. "After that, Eliza would be on her own, and they both knew it." Eliza spent that first night lying awake on her cot in Kowalski's storeroom, staring at the ceiling and trying to figure out how to conjure $100 out of thin air. She had $32 saved from her work with Cole and Kowalski. That left $68 she didn't have and no clear way to get them. She could ask Cole to lend her the money, but that felt wrong, like admitting she couldn't solve her own problems. She could try to collect more debts faster, but most of the outstanding accounts were already on payment plans or involved buyers too far away to pressure quickly. She could run. The thought came to her in the dark hours before dawn, whispered by the part of her brain that was tired and scared and wanted to survive at any cost. She had enough money for a stagecoach ticket. She could be gone before Kane came looking. Let Silver Creek and Cole Dawson and all her half-built plans collapse behind her. But even as the thought formed, she knew she wouldn't do it. Not because she was brave, but because running would mean that Jacob Hale had won. That every man who'd ever dismissed her or underestimated her or treated her like she was disposable had been right. And Eliza had spent too much of her life proving people wrong to start proving them right now. So she got up, splashed cold water on her face, and started making a list of every possible way to earn $68 in 2 weeks. By the time the sun came up, she had a plan. It wasn't a good plan, but it was something. She found William Kowalski in the store's back room, sorting through inventory with the kind of methodical slowness that suggested his mind was somewhere else entirely. "I need to ask you something," Eliza said without preamble. Kowalski looked up, took in her expression, and set down his clipboard. "This about Kane? How did you—" "Whole town knows by now. Cole was in here last night, buying ammunition and looking like he wanted to shoot someone. Didn't take much to figure out why." Kowalski leaned against the counter. "You really promised Kane $100? "I did." "You got $100. "I've got 32. Kowalski whistled low. "That's a problem." "I know. That's why I need your help." Eliza pulled out her list. "I've been going over the books. There are still accounts outstanding, smaller ones that I haven't had time to collect yet. If I focus on nothing but debt collection for the next 2 weeks, I might be able to get close. Might ain't gonna cut it with Kane. I know that too, but it's the best option I have." She looked at Kowalski directly. "I need you to give me a bigger percentage, 20% instead of 10, just for the next 2 weeks. After that, we go back to the original agreement." Kowalski frowned. "That's a big ask." "I know, but I'm desperate. And if I don't come up with this money, Kane's going to come after me. And if he comes after me, he's going to make an example out of me in front of the whole town. That's bad for me. But it's also bad for you, for everyone, because it sends a message that nobody can stand up to him. Nobody should stand up to him. That's how you stay alive. Maybe, but I already did stand up to him. And now I have to deal with the consequences. I'm asking for help, Mr. Kowalski, not a handout. I'll earn every cent. I just need better terms for a short time." Kowalski studied her for a long moment. Then he sighed, a sound that came from somewhere deep in his chest. 20%, but only for debts you collect in the next 2 weeks. And if you don't make it, if Kane comes for you, I can't help you. I'm too old to fight and too poor to pay him off. I understand. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. Thank me if you survive this." Eliza spent the next 12 days in a blur of activity that left her exhausted and running on nothing but coffee and sheer determination. She collected debts from people who'd been dodging payment for months. She negotiated payment plans with traders who came through town. She even traveled to a mining camp 15 miles north to track down a buyer who owed Cole $40 from a cattle sale 2 years ago. The man tried to claim he didn't remember the transaction until Eliza showed him the receipt with his signature on it. He paid $25 on the spot and promised the rest within the month. Every dollar she collected went into a leather pouch she kept hidden under a loose floorboard in her room. Every night she counted the money, watching the total creep up with agonizing slowness. $32 became $45. $45 became $61. $61 became $73. But time was running out, and she was still $27 short. On the evening of the 11th day, Eliza sat at Kowalski's counter with her head in her hands, trying not to cry from frustration and exhaustion. She'd done everything she could think of. There were no more debts to collect quickly, no more buyers to track down, no more tricks left to pull. She was going to fail. The door opened behind her, and she heard Cole's voice. She here? In the back, Kowalski replied. Footsteps approached, and then Cole was standing beside her. He looked at her face and immediately said, "How short are you?" $27. I'll lend it to you. No. Don't be stupid. You need the money. I got the money. It's simple. Eliza lifted her head and looked at him. His face was hard with determination, but underneath it she could see something else, concern that he was trying very hard not to show. It's not simple, she said. If I take your money, then I'm just trading one debt for another, and you'll spend the rest of our working relationship knowing that I couldn't solve my own problem. I'll spend the rest of our working relationship knowing you're alive. That's worth $27. To you, maybe. Not to me. Cole's jaw tightened. You're the most stubborn woman I ever met. So I've been told. This ain't about pride, Eliza. This is about survival. It was the first time he'd used her first name, and the intimacy of it caught her off guard. For a moment she couldn't speak. I know what it's about, she said finally. But if I take your money, I'm giving up, and I'm not ready to do that yet. You got 1 day left. I know, and no way to get $27. I know that too. Cole stared at her, and she could see the frustration building behind his eyes. He wanted to force her to take the money, wanted to solve her problem for her whether she liked it or not. But he also understood, maybe better than anyone, what it meant to need to stand on your own. Fine, he said finally. But when Kane shows up tomorrow, I'm going to be there. And if he tries to hurt you, I'm going to kill him. That's not negotiable. Cole? Not negotiable, he repeated. Then he turned and walked out, leaving Eliza alone with her failing plan and 1 day left to make a miracle happen. That night, Eliza couldn't sleep. She lay on her cot, staring at the ceiling, her mind racing through possibilities she'd already exhausted. Every scenario ended the same way. Her standing in front of Kane, $27 short, with nothing to offer but excuses he wouldn't accept. She thought about her mother, who died when Eliza was 12 and left her with nothing but a Bible and a piece of advice. When you can't go over a problem, go through it. But how did you go through a problem when the problem was money you didn't have? The answer came to her just before dawn, sharp and clear, and absolutely terrifying. She couldn't get $27 more, but she could get something worth $27. Eliza got up, dressed quickly, and went to the one place in Silver Creek that might have what she needed. Claire Hayes' boarding house was dark when Eliza arrived, but she knocked anyway, loud enough to wake the widow, but hopefully not loud enough to wake the whole town. Clara opened the door in her nightgown, a lamp in one hand and suspicion on her face. It's 5 a.m. I know. I'm sorry. But I need to ask you something, and I need an answer before Kane shows up today. Claire's expression shifted from annoyed to wary. What kind of something? Can I come in? Clara hesitated, then stepped aside. The boarding house's main room was small and cluttered, but clean. There was a worn sofa, a table with mismatched chairs, and a cabinet filled with dishes that had probably been nice once, but were now chipped and faded. Well, Clara said. What do you want? I need to borrow something valuable, something I can give to Kane as collateral until I can pay him the full amount. Collateral for what? I owe him $100. I have $73. I need something worth at least $27 to make up the difference. Clara laughed, a short, bitter sound. You think I got anything worth $27 lying around? Look at this place. If I had something that valuable, I'd have sold it years ago. Please, Clara, there must be something. Jewelry, maybe. Or, I sold my jewelry when my husband died. Use the money to keep this place running. Clara's voice was hard. I got nothing worth giving you, Miss Hartwell. And even if I did, why would I? You brought this on yourself by getting involved with Kane. You're right, I did. But if Kane makes an example of me, it sends a message to everyone in this town that we're powerless, that we have to accept whatever men like him decide to do to us. I'm trying to show that we can stand up, that we can fight back, but I can't do it alone. Then maybe you shouldn't be doing it at all. Eliza felt something crack inside her chest. You really believe that? That the answer is just to give up and let men like Kane run everything? I believe in staying alive. I believe in not making trouble for myself when I already got enough trouble just getting by. Clara set down her lamp and crossed her arms. You're young. You still think you can change things. But I'm old enough to know better. Silver Creek is dying. Kane is just one more symptom of that. And standing up to symptoms don't cure the disease. Maybe not, but at least it means something. It means you get hurt. That's all it means. They stood there in the dim lamplight, two women separated by age and experience and hope. Finally, Clara said, There is one thing. Eliza's heart jumped. What? A ring, my wedding ring. It's gold. Real gold, not plated. My husband bought it in Denver before we got married. It's probably worth $30, maybe more if you find the right buyer. Clara, but I ain't giving it to you. I ain't even lending it to you. Clara's voice was firm. Because that ring is the only thing I got left of my husband, and I'll be damned if I'm going to let it end up in Kane's hands because you decided to play hero. Eliza felt the last of her hope drain away. I understand. I'm sorry I bothered you. She turned to leave, but Clara's voice stopped her. I said, I ain't giving it to you. I didn't say I wouldn't help. Eliza turned back. What? I'll go with you. When you meet Kane, and if you're short on the money, I'll offer the ring directly to him, as my collateral, not yours, with the understanding that you'll pay me back within 2 months, and when you do, I get the ring back. Clara, you don't have to, I know I don't have to, but maybe you're right. Maybe standing up means something, or maybe I'm just tired of being scared all the time. Clara's voice softened slightly. Either way, you helped this town, helped me. Least I can do is stand with you when things get hard. Eliza felt tears prick at her eyes. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. Thank me if we both survive this. The meeting with Kane was set for noon at the edge of town, near the old livery stable. Eliza arrived 15 minutes early with $73 in a pouch, and Clara Hayes at her side wearing her best dress and a determined expression that didn't quite hide her fear. Cole was already there, leaning against a fence post with his rifle visible and his face set in stone. He looked at Clara, then at Eliza, and something in his expression shifted, not softening exactly, but acknowledging that Eliza hadn't come alone. You shouldn't be here, Eliza said to him. Neither should you, but here we are. Tom Milhouse arrived next, followed by Samuel Briggs and Otto. Then William Kowalski, moving slowly but deliberately. Even Danny, the young apprentice, showed up carrying a wrench like he planned to use it as a weapon if needed. Eliza stared at them all, her throat tight. What are you doing? What's it look like, Samuel said. We're standing with you. This is between me and Kane. No, it ain't, Otto said in his gravelly voice. You stood up for Samuel when Kane came for him. Now we're standing up for you. This could get dangerous. It's already dangerous, Tom Milhouse said. Might as well face it together. Eliza wanted to tell them to leave, to save themselves, to not risk their lives over her mistake. But she also knew that this moment was bigger than just her debt to Kane. This was Silver Creek deciding whether it was going to keep being a place where fear ruled or become something else. At exactly noon, Kane and his men rode up. He looked at the group gathered around Eliza and smiled. Well now, this is touching. You brought your friends to watch. I brought the money, Eliza said, her voice steady despite her racing heart. All of it? Most of it, $73. She held up the pouch. And collateral for the rest. Kane dismounted and walked over. He took the pouch, opened it, and counted the money slowly. When he finished, he looked up. You're 27 short. I know. That's why I have collateral. Clara stepped forward before Eliza could say anything else. A gold wedding ring, worth at least $30. You hold it until she pays the rest, then you give it back. Kane looked at Clara like he was seeing her for the first time. Clara Hayes, didn't expect to see you here. Life's full of surprises. Let me see the ring. Clara pulled it from her pocket and held it out. Kane took it, examined it, bit it to test the gold, and nodded. This'll do, but here's the terms. She's got 2 months to pay the $27 plus interest, $3 a month interest. If she don't pay, the ring's mine and we're done. If she makes trouble in the meantime, the deal's off and I take payment however I see fit. It was extortion on top of extortion, but Eliza didn't have a choice. Agreed. Say it where everyone can hear. I want witnesses. Eliza raised her voice. I agree to pay $27 plus $6 interest within 2 months. If I fail to pay, Clara Hayes' ring becomes your property. Kane smiled. Good girl. He pocketed the money and the ring. 2 months. Don't forget. He started to mount his horse, but Cole's voice cut across the clearing. Kane, the outlaw turned. Yeah? You got your money and your collateral. That means your business here is done, so if you or any of your men come back to Silver Creek looking for trouble, you're going to find more than you bargained for. And that ain't a threat. That's a promise. The two men stared at each other, and the air felt electric with potential violence. Finally, Kane laughed. You got backbone, Dawson. I respect that. But don't confuse one settlement for protection. This town ain't under my thumb yet, but it could be. Real easy. You remember that. Then he and his men rode off, leaving Silver Creek standing together in the dust. For a long moment, nobody spoke. Then Samuel Briggs said, Did we just do something really brave or really stupid? Both, Otto replied. Definitely both. Claire was staring at her empty hand where the ring had been, her face unreadable. Eliza went to her side. I'll get it back, I promise. You better. That ring's the only thing keeping me from completely giving up on the idea that things can get better. Clara looked at Eliza. Which maybe makes me as crazy as you are. Maybe. Cole approached them, his expression still hard, but his eyes holding something that might have been respect. You got 2 months to earn $27 plus interest. That's 33 total. I know how to add. Just making sure you understand what you signed up for. I understand. But thank you for being here. Eliza gestured at the group of people still standing around. For all of this. Don't thank me. Thank them. They're the ones who decided to show up. Cole adjusted his hat. But you should know something. That display we just put on, that's going to get back to Kane, and he's going to see it as a challenge, which means he'll be back. Maybe not tomorrow, maybe not next week, but he'll be back. And next time it won't be about collecting debts. It'll be about proving who runs things around here. Then we'll deal with it when it comes. You say that like you got a plan. I don't. But I'll figure something out. I always do. Cole almost smiled. You're either the bravest woman I ever met or the craziest. Maybe both. Definitely both, Eliza said, echoing Samuel's words. This time, Cole actually did smile. Just a little. Just enough. The group dispersed slowly, people heading back to their work and their lives, but something had shifted. Eliza could feel it. Silver Creek wasn't just a collection of desperate people anymore. It was starting to become a community. That evening, Eliza sat in her room and counted her remaining money. She had nothing left from her savings. It had all gone to Kane, which meant she was starting from zero again, with $33 to earn in 2 months and no margin for error. But she also had something she hadn't had before. People who would stand with her. People who'd proven they wouldn't run when things got hard. There was a knock on her door. Cole stood in the hallway holding a plate covered with a cloth. You didn't eat today. I wasn't hungry. Don't care. You need to eat. He handed her the plate. Underneath the cloth was bread, cheese, and some dried meat. Simple food, but more than she'd have bothered to make for herself. Thank you. Don't thank me, just eat it. Cole shifted his weight, looking uncomfortable. I wanted to say something about today. What about it? You handled it well, better than I would have. I would have just shot him and dealt with the consequences. But you found another way, a way that didn't get anyone killed. I got lucky. No, you got smart. There's a difference. Cole met her eyes. I'm glad you didn't take my money, not because I didn't want to help, but because you were right. You needed to solve this yourself, and you did. I had help. Yeah, but you earned that help by being the kind of person people want to stand with. He paused. I ain't good at this, at saying things, but I want you to know that what you're doing, trying to save this town, it matters. Even if it don't work, it matters that you tried. Eliza felt her throat tighten. Why are you telling me this? Because someone should, and because... Cole looked away. Because for the first time in a long time, I'm starting to think maybe Silver Creek ain't completely dead. Maybe it's just been waiting for someone stubborn enough to refuse to let it die. You really believe that? I'm starting to. He left before Eliza could respond, and she sat alone in her room with the plate of food and the weight of what he'd said settling over her like a blanket. Cole Dawson, the man who didn't believe in hope, was starting to hope again, and somehow that felt more valuable than any amount of money she could have collected. Eliza ate the food slowly, tasting each bite, and for the first time since Kane had shown up at Cole's cabin, she allowed herself to feel something other than fear. She felt possibility. The next 2 months were going to be hard. She'd have to work longer hours, collect more debts, find new ways to earn money, and all the while she'd have to watch over her shoulder for Kane's inevitable return. But she wouldn't be doing it alone. Silver Creek was starting to fight back, and Eliza was going to make damn sure it won. The weeks that followed Kane's departure moved with a strange kind of momentum, like a wagon that had finally broken free from mud and was now rolling downhill, fast enough to be exciting, but not so fast that Eliza couldn't steer. She threw herself into work with an intensity that bordered on obsession. Every morning she was at Cole's cabin before dawn, organizing records and drafting letters. Every afternoon she was in town, helping Kowalski manage inventory or tracking down outstanding payments. Every evening she collapsed into her cot, too exhausted to worry about Kane or Clara's ring or the $33 she still needed to earn. The money came in slowly at first, $5 from a debt she'd nearly forgotten about. $8 from helping a traveling merchant negotiate better prices with Kowalski. $3 from teaching Clara's new boarder how to read, a minor who'd never learned and was embarrassed to admit it. By the end of the first month, Eliza had earned $19. She gave it all to Clara immediately, not wanting to risk spending it on something else. "You're ahead of schedule, sir," Clara said, tucking the money into a tin box she kept hidden in her kitchen. "At this rate, you'll have my ring back before the deadline. That's the plan. And what happens after? When Kane comes back? Because he will come back." Eliza had been asking herself the same question every night. "I don't know, but I'll figure something out." "You keep saying that, like you got some kind of magic ability to solve impossible problems." "I don't have magic. I just have stubbornness and a refusal to accept that things can't get better." Clara studied her for a long moment. "You really believe that? That things can get better?" "I have to. Because if I don't believe it, then what's the point of any of this? The point is survival, same as it's always been." "No," Eliza said firmly. "Survival is what you do when you've given up on everything else. I'm not surviving anymore. I'm building." Clara didn't respond, but something in her expression shifted, like she wanted to believe what Eliza was saying but couldn't quite let herself. The second month brought changes that even Eliza hadn't anticipated. Tom Milhouse and Cole completed the purchase of the Henderson property, and within 2 weeks they'd moved 30 head of cattle onto the new grazing land. It wasn't a massive operation by any standard, but it was growth. Real, visible growth. Samuel Briggs and Otto expanded their partnership, taking on 2 more apprentices and opening a small workshop that serviced equipment for every ranch within 30 miles. The workshop wasn't fancy, just a shed with a forge and some tools, but it meant jobs. It meant young men who'd been planning to leave Silver Creek could stay and learn a trade. Even Kowalski's store started showing signs of life. He hired Clara's oldest boarder to help with heavy lifting, which freed up Eliza to focus on the accounts and freed up Kowalski to actually talk to customers instead of just taking their money and hoping they'd leave him alone. And people started coming back. Not in droves. Not like Silver Creek was suddenly a boomtown again, but a family here, a drifter there, a merchant who decided the town was worth a regular stop. Small additions that added up to something that almost felt like momentum. But underneath all the progress, Eliza could feel the tension building. Because everyone in Silver Creek knew what she knew, Kane hadn't forgotten about them. He was out there somewhere, biding his time, waiting for the right moment to remind them who really held the power. The moment came on a cold December afternoon, 6 weeks after Eliza had made her deal with Kane. She was at Cole's cabin, finishing up some paperwork, when she heard horses approaching. Multiple horses moving fast. Her stomach dropped even before she looked out the window and saw them. Kane and his men. But this time there were more than 4. There were at least 8 riders, maybe more, and they were armed like they were going to war. Cole was in the barn. Eliza ran to get him, her heart pounding so hard she thought it might break through her ribs. "Cole, Kane's here, with at least 8 men." Cole emerged from the barn, took one look at the approaching riders, and his face went hard. "Get inside, lock the door. I'm not hiding while—" "You ain't hiding, you're staying alive, now get inside." But before Eliza could move, the riders had surrounded the property. Kane dismounted slowly, deliberately, his smile wide and mean. "Dawson, we need to talk." Cole stepped forward, his hand resting on his gun. "State your business." "My business is with the whole town, but since you seem to be the one calling shots these days, figured I'd start with you." Kane gestured to his men. "See? I've been hearing things. Hearing that Silver Creek thinks it's getting strong again, that people are standing up, making plans, building futures." He said the last word like it was a joke. "And I realized something. I've been too lenient, too willing to let you folks think you got a say in how things work." "We paid what we owed you," Eliza said, stepping out from behind Cole despite his warning look. "Our business is done." "Your business is done when I say it's done." Kane's smile vanished. "Here's how this works now. Every business in Silver Creek pays me $20 a month, protection money, to make sure nothing bad happens to your little renaissance here." Cole's voice was dangerously quiet. "That's extortion. That's economics. You want to do business in this territory? You pay for the privilege. And if you don't?" Kane shrugged. "Well, accidents happen, buildings burn, cattle disappear, people get hurt. Be a shame if all your hard work went up in smoke. You can't just— I can do whatever I want. That's the benefit of having 8 armed men and no law within 50 miles. Kane looked around at the cabin, the barn, the corral. "This is a nice setup you got here, Dawson. Real nice. Be terrible if something happened to it." The threat hung in the air, clear and unmistakable. Eliza's mind raced. $20 a month from every business in Silver Creek would cripple them. It would undo everything they'd built. But refusing meant violence. Violence that Silver Creek couldn't win, not against 8 armed men. "How many businesses are you demanding payment from?" Eliza asked. Kane counted on his fingers mockingly. "Let's see. The store, the stable, the blacksmith workshop, the boarding house. Both ranches. That's 6. $20 each. $120 a month. Every month. Or things start getting real unfortunate around here. And if we agree to pay, you leave us alone?" "I leave you alone as long as the payments keep coming. You miss one and the deal's off." Kane stepped closer to Cole, his voice dropping. "And before you get any ideas about fighting back, understand something. I got friends. Lots of friends. You kill me, they'll burn this town to the ground and everyone in it. So you can be smart and pay, or you can be stupid and die. Your choice." Cole's hand twitched toward his gun, and Eliza saw the calculation in his eyes, wondering if he could draw fast enough, if he could take down Kane before the other men opened fire, if dying was worth it to take this bastard with him. "Cole, don't," Eliza said quietly. "Listen to your girlfriend, Dawson. She's got more sense than you do." "I'm not his girlfriend. I'm his business partner. And as his partner, I'd like to propose an alternative." Kane laughed. "Here we go again, the girl with the smart mouth and her alternative arrangements. This ought to be good. You want $120 a month from Silver Creek. That's $1,440 a year. A significant amount." Eliza forced herself to sound calm, professional, even though her hands were shaking. "But it's also a risky proposition. You have to come collect every month. You have to enforce payment. You have to maintain your reputation through fear and violence, which takes time and resources. And there's always the chance that someone gets brave and tries to fight back, which creates problems for you." So what if instead of monthly payments, you got a larger lump sum up front, a one-time payment that's worth more than your annual extortion, and then you leave Silver Creek alone permanently? No more collections, no more enforcement, just cash in hand and you move on to easier targets. Kane's expression shifted from amused to interested. "How much are we talking?" $2,000. The number hung in the air like a gunshot. Kane stared at her. "You're insane. This town don't have $2,000? Not right now, but we could get it. You give us 4 months and we'll raise $2,000. You take it, sign a document saying you'll leave Silver Creek alone, and everyone gets what they want. What I want is regular income, not a one-time payout. What you want is money without risk. This gives you that. $2,000 is more than you'd make from Silver Creek in a year and a half, and you get it without having to come back here every month and deal with the possibility that someday we'll actually fight back. One of Kane's men laughed. She's got balls, I'll give her that. Kane didn't laugh. He was thinking, his eyes narrowed. 4 months. That's a long time. How do I know you won't just run? Because we've been building this town back up. We're not going to abandon it now. And besides, where would we run to? This is our home. 4 months is also a long time for me to lose income from other protection arrangements I could be making, which is why we'll give you a down payment, $500 within 2 weeks, to show good faith, then the remaining $1,500 in 4 months. Cole grabbed Eliza's arm. Can I talk to you, privately? In a minute. Now. Eliza let Cole pull her a few feet away, though she could still feel Kane's eyes on them. What the hell are you doing, Cole hissed. We don't have $500, let alone $2,000. I know. Then why are you promising it? Because I'm buying us time to figure out a real solution. The real solution is shooting him right now and dealing with the consequences. The consequence is everyone in this town dying, including you, including me. Is that what you want? Cole's jaw worked. I want him gone. So do I, but this is how we do it. We play smart, not hard. And if we can't raise the money, then we'll deal with that when it comes. But at least we'll have tried something other than dying. Cole looked at her for a long moment, and Eliza could see the war happening behind his eyes, between the part of him that wanted to fight and the part that was starting to trust her judgment. Finally, he said, You better know what you're doing. I don't, but I'm doing it anyway. They turned back to Kane. We have a deal, Eliza said. $500 in 2 weeks, $2,000 total in 4 months. You sign a document agreeing to leave Silver Creek alone permanently, and we pay you in full. Kane looked at his men, then back at Eliza. I want $600 up front, and if you miss the deadline on either payment, the deal's off, and I take what I want however I want. Deal. And I want the document to say that if you ever cause trouble for me or mine, all bets are off. Agreed. Kane smiled slowly. You're either the smartest woman I ever met or the dumbest. Guess we'll find out in 4 months. He mounted his horse. 2 weeks, Miss Hartwell. Don't disappoint me. Then he and his men rode off, leaving Eliza and Cole standing in the yard with a promise they had no idea how to keep. The moment Kane was out of sight, Cole rounded on her. $600 in 2 weeks? $2,000 in 4 months? Are you out of your mind? Probably. This ain't funny. I know it's not funny, but what was I supposed to do? Let him extort us forever? Watch him burn down everything we've built? You should have let me shoot him. And then what? His men kill you, kill me, probably kill half the town as revenge? That's not a solution, Cole. That's suicide. Cole paced back and forth like a caged animal. We can't raise $2,000. It's impossible. It's not impossible. It's just hard. How? How are we going to do it? Eliza had been running calculations in her head from the moment she'd made the offer. We have some money already. Between what I've saved and what the town has collected, we probably have about $300 we could pool together. That leaves $300 more for the first payment and $1,700 for the second. That's still impossible. Not if we work together. Every business in Silver Creek contributes what they can. We sell off assets we don't need. We find buyers for cattle, equipment, anything valuable. We take on extra work. We ask for help from ranchers and merchants in surrounding territories. We do whatever it takes. And if we can't, Eliza met his eyes, then we fight. But at least we'll have tried everything else first. Cole stared at her, and slowly the anger in his expression shifted to something else. Something that might have been respect or admiration, or just exhausted acceptance. You really think we can do this? I think we don't have a choice, so we might as well believe we can. That evening, Eliza called a meeting at Kowalski's store. Everyone showed up. Cole, Tom Milhouse, Samuel Briggs, Otto, Clara, Danny, and half a dozen others who'd heard something was happening and wanted to know what. Eliza stood behind the counter and laid out the situation plainly. Kane's demand, her counteroffer, the timeline they were working with, and the amount of money they needed to raise. When she finished, the room was silent. Then William Kowalski said, "That's impossible." "Probably," Eliza agreed, "but I'm asking you to try anyway. Why should we?" Pike, the man who told her off months ago, stood in the back with his arms crossed. "Why should we give everything we got to pay off some outlaw? Why not just leave? Cut our losses and go somewhere safer?" "Because there is nowhere safer," Eliza said. "Men like Kane exist everywhere. Towns die everywhere. The only difference is whether you fight or give up. And I'm tired of giving up." "Easy for you to say. You got nothing to lose." "I have everything to lose. This town is all I have. It's all any of us have. And if we let Kane take it without a fight, then we're saying our lives don't matter. Our work doesn't matter. That we're willing to accept whatever scraps the world decides to throw us." "Well, I'm not willing to accept that. And I don't think you are either." Pike looked away, but he didn't leave. Tom Milhouse spoke up. "How much would each business need to contribute?" "Depends on how many businesses participate and what they can afford. But if we split it evenly, probably about $300 per business over 4 months. "That's a lot of money." "I know, but it's less than what Kane would take in ongoing extortion, and it's a one-time payment instead of forever." "And if we can't raise it all?" Samuel asked. "Then we pool whatever we can and negotiate again. Or we fight. Or we run. But at least we'll know we tried." Clara stood up from where she'd been sitting near the window. "I'm in. I got about $40 saved. You can have it." "Clara, I'm in," she repeated firmly. "That ring you're trying to get back for me? It ain't worth nothing if this town dies anyway. So take the money." One by one, others started pledging amounts. Kowalski offered $50 and a portion of his inventory to sell. Tom Milhouse committed $100 and said he'd reach out to other ranchers. Samuel and Otto pooled their resources and came up with $75. Even Danny offered his wages for the next 3 months. By the end of the night, they had pledges totaling $420 toward the first payment and commitments for more to come. It wasn't enough, but it was a start. Over the next 2 weeks, Silver Creek transformed into something Eliza had never seen before. People worked together with a singular focus that bordered on desperation. They sold equipment they didn't absolutely need. They took on extra jobs. They reached out to contacts in other towns, asking for loans or advance payments on future work. Eliza worked 18-hour days, coordinating efforts, tracking contributions, drafting appeals to potential supporters. She wrote letters to cattle buyers, to merchants, to anyone who might be willing to help. She negotiated the sale of Cole's extra horses. She convinced a traveling trader to pay in advance for a shipment of goods from Kowalski's store. Cole sold half his herd, the cattle he'd just bought with the Henderson property money, at a loss just to raise cash quickly. It hurt him physically to do it. Eliza could see it in his face, but he did it anyway. Tom Milhouse mortgaged his ranch to a bank in Cheyenne and brought back $300. Clara sold most of her furniture. Otto closed his old workshop and sold the property to Danny's family for half what it was worth just to contribute. On the 13th day, Eliza counted everything they'd raised, $587. They'd done it. They'd actually done it. When she told Cole, he just stared at the money like it was a hallucination. "I didn't think it was possible." "Neither did I, but we did it anyway. We did it by selling everything we own. We did it by deciding that Silver Creek was worth fighting for." Cole looked at her, and for the first time since she'd known him, he smiled. Not almost, not a little, but a real genuine smile that reached his eyes and made him look 10 years younger. "You're something else, Eliza Hartwell." "So I've been told." The meeting with Kane happened exactly 2 weeks after their deal, at the same spot near the old livery stable. Eliza arrived with Cole, Clara, Tom, and Samuel, a delegation representing Silver Creek's commitment. Kane showed up with fewer men this time, just 3. He was confident, relaxed, probably thought they'd fail. "Well," he said, "you got my money?" Eliza handed him a pouch. $600, count it. Kane opened the pouch, counted slowly, and his eyebrows rose. I'll be damned. You actually did it. We said we would. Most people say a lot of things they don't mean. Color me impressed. Kane pocketed the money. 4 months for the rest, don't forget. We won't. And we'll need that document. The one saying you'll leave Silver Creek alone permanently once we've paid in full. Kane pulled out a folded paper from his coat. Already had it drawn up. Figured if you were crazy enough to raise $600, you might actually pull this off. Eliza read the document carefully. It was crude but legally binding enough for their purposes. It stated that upon receipt of $2,000, Kane and his associates would cease all extortion and protection activities in Silver Creek and would not retaliate against its residents for any past disputes. This works, Eliza said. We'll see you in 4 months with the rest. Kane tipped his hat. I look forward to it, Miss Hartwell. You're the most interesting thing to happen around here in years. After he left, the delegation stood together in the cold December air, and Clara said, We just gave him $600. Money we'll never see again if we can't raise the rest. We'll raise it, Eliza said with more confidence than she felt. How? The same way we raised the first payment, by working together and refusing to give up. That worked once, Samuel said. Don't mean it'll work again. Then we better make sure it does. The next 4 months were the hardest of Eliza's life. Raising the first payment had required sacrifice. Raising the second payment required something closer to a miracle, because they'd already sold most of what they could sell, already borrowed what they could borrow, already worked themselves to exhaustion. But they kept going. Cole and Tom expanded their cattle operation again, taking a massive risk by buying young stock they'd have to grow before selling. It meant debt and uncertainty, but it also meant potential profit that could contribute to the payment. Kowalski turned his store into the hub for a trading network that stretched 50 miles in every direction. He became the middleman for ranchers and merchants who needed supplies, taking a small percentage on each transaction. It was tedious work, but it added up. Clara converted her boarding house into a full-service establishment, offering meals and laundry services in addition to rooms. She worked from dawn until midnight, and Eliza often found her asleep at the kitchen table after finishing the day's work. Samuel and Otto started taking jobs outside Silver Creek, traveling to mining camps and ranches to provide services. It meant being away from home for days at a time, but the money was better. And Eliza did everything. She kept the books for every business. She coordinated the trading network. She wrote letters to potential investors. She organized a community fund where people could contribute whatever they could spare, even if it was just $1 or $2. She also started teaching, reading and writing lessons for adults who'd never learned, basic mathematics for young people who wanted to work in trade. She charged a small fee, just 50 cents per month per student, but it added up. And more importantly, it gave people skills they could use to earn more money themselves. By the end of March, they had raised $1,300 of the $1,700 they still needed. By mid-April, they had $1,500. But time was running out, and they were still $200 short. Eliza lay awake at night doing calculations that never added up. They'd exhausted every option, sold everything that wasn't essential, worked every job they could find, and they were still short. On the first day of May, with 3 weeks left until the payment deadline, Cole found Eliza in the store's back room, staring at her ledgers like they might suddenly reveal hidden money. We're not going to make it, she said without looking up. We might. We won't. I've done the math 100 times. Unless something changes dramatically, we're going to be at least $150 short. Cole sat down across from her. There is one option we haven't considered. What? We renegotiate with Kane. Tell him we'll pay what we have now and the rest over time, with interest. He won't agree to that. He might. He's already gotten $600 from us. If we give him another $1,500, that's $2,100 total, more than his original demand. He'd be stupid not to take it. Eliza shook her head. Men like Kane don't care about being smart. They care about being right. If we don't pay exactly what we promised, he'll see it as us breaking our word, and he'll use it as an excuse to take whatever he wants. Then what do we do? Eliza closed the ledger and looked at Cole. I don't know. For the first time since I got to Silver Creek, I honestly don't know. It was the most defeated she'd ever sounded. and Cole hated hearing it. He reached across the table and took her hand, the first time he'd voluntarily touched her. "We'll figure something out. We always do." "That's what I keep saying, but maybe this time it's not enough." "It's enough. It has to be." They sat there in the dim light of the storeroom, holding hands and trying to believe in solutions that didn't exist. The answer came from an unexpected source. 3 days later, a man rode into Silver Creek on a fine horse, wearing expensive clothes and asking for Eliza Hartwell. His name was Richard Morrison, and he was a cattle broker from Denver who'd heard about Silver Creek's situation through Tom Millhouse's contacts. "I understand you're trying to raise money to pay off an extortion scheme," Morrison said when Eliza met with him. "That's not exactly how I'd phrase it, but yes. How much do you still need?" $200. We have 3 weeks to raise it." Morrison looked around Silver Creek, at the store, the stable, the workshops, the small signs of life that Eliza and the others had built over the past months. "This town is dying. We're trying to save it." "Why? There are other towns." "Better towns. Why waste your time on this one?" Eliza had been asked variations of this question so many times she had the answer ready. "Because if I give up on Silver Creek, then I'm admitting that places like this, places that aren't perfect, that aren't easy, that require work, aren't worth saving, and I don't believe that. I believe anything worth having is worth fighting for." Morrison studied her for a long moment. Then he smiled. "I like you, Miss Hartwell. You've got fire. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to invest in Silver Creek. Not as charity, but as business. I'll give you the $200 you need, plus an additional $300 as working capital. In exchange, I want a 5% stake in the town's trading cooperative. We don't have a trading cooperative. Then I suggest you start one. With that kind of structure, you can coordinate resources more efficiently, negotiate better prices, and create sustainable income. It's what successful towns do. And if you're going to survive beyond this payment to Kane, you need to think about sustainability." Eliza's mind raced. A cooperative made sense. It would formalize what they'd been doing informally for months. It would give them structure, accountability, and the ability to attract more investment. 5% of gross or net? Net profits. I'm not here to take everything you earn. I'm here to help you earn more. And if the cooperative fails, then I lose my investment. But I don't think it will fail, not with you running it. Eliza looked at Cole, who'd been standing quietly nearby. He nodded once. "Deal," Eliza said, "but I want the investment terms in writing." Morrison laughed. "Smart woman. I'll have my attorney draw up the documents. You'll have your money by the end of the week." He was true to his word. 5 days later, Eliza had $500 in hand, $200 for the Kane payment, $300 for the cooperative. The final payment to Kane happened on a warm May afternoon that felt more like summer than spring. Eliza arrived with an entourage: Cole, Tom, Samuel, Otto, Clara, Kowalski, Danny, and a dozen others who'd contributed to the fund. They'd all wanted to be there to see it finished. Kane showed up exactly on time, his men flanking him. He looked surprised by the crowd. "You brought an audience." "We brought witnesses," Eliza corrected. She handed him a heavy leather pouch. $2,000. Exactly as promised. Kane opened the pouch and counted. It took him several minutes, and the crowd waited in tense silence. Finally, he looked up. "It's all here." "Then we're done. Sign the document." Kane pulled out the paper they'd agreed on and signed it with a flourish. "There. You're free. Silver Creek is officially under its own protection, or lack thereof. We'll manage." Kane mounted his horse, then paused. "You know what? I'm almost disappointed. I was looking forward to seeing what happened when you couldn't pay. But you did it. Against all odds, you actually did it. Never underestimate what people can do when they work together. I won't make that mistake again." Kane tipped his hat. "Good luck, Miss Hartwell. Something tells me you won't need it." Then he rode away, and Silver Creek erupted in cheers. People were hugging, crying, laughing. Clara grabbed Eliza and held her so tight she could barely breathe. Samuel and Otto were slapping each other on the back. Even Kowalski was smiling, actually smiling, for the first time since Eliza had met him. But the person Eliza was looking at was Cole. He stood apart from the celebration, watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read. When their eyes met, he walked over. You did it. We did it. No, this was you. You're the one who believed it was possible. The rest of us just followed your lead. That's not... It is, and you know it. Cole took off his hat, ran a hand through his hair, and said something she'd never expected to hear from him. I was wrong about you. When you first showed up, I thought you were just another desperate woman who'd be gone in a month. But you stayed, and you fought, and you turned this town into something worth staying for. Eliza felt her throat tighten. Cole, let me finish. When my wife died, I decided that caring about things was too painful, that trying to build something just meant watching it fall apart. So I stopped trying. I just existed, went through the motions, survived. But you showed me something I'd forgotten, that existing ain't the same as living, and that sometimes the things worth caring about are the things that scare you most. What are you saying? Cole looked at her with eyes that were no longer guarded, no longer cold. I'm saying I care about this town again. And I care about you. And I know I ain't good at saying things like this, and I know I'm probably too late because you're way smarter than me and could do better, but if you were willing, I'd like to try. To be more than just business partners, to actually build something together. Eliza stared at him, her heart pounding. She'd spent months working beside Cole, learning his rhythms, understanding his silences. She'd seen him change from a man who'd given up to a man who was willing to hope again. And somewhere along the way, without quite meaning to, she'd fallen in love with him. Cole Dawson, are you asking me to court you? I'm asking you to consider it. Think about it. Take your time. I ain't going nowhere. Eliza smiled, a real, genuine smile that felt like the sun breaking through clouds. I don't need time. My answer is yes. Cole looked stunned, like he'd prepared himself for rejection and didn't know what to do with acceptance. Then slowly, he smiled back. Yeah? Yeah. He pulled her close, right there in the middle of the street with half the town watching, and kissed her. It wasn't a perfect kiss. Their noses bumped and someone in the crowd whistled, but it was real and honest and full of promise. When they broke apart, Clara was crying and Tom was laughing and Kowalski was shaking his head like he couldn't believe what he was seeing. Does this mean you're staying? Clara asked. Really staying? I'm staying, Eliza said. This is my home now. The months that followed were full of work, but it was different work. Not desperate survival, but actual building. The trading cooperative that Morrison had suggested became a reality, with Eliza as its manager and representatives from each business in Silver Creek. They pooled resources, negotiated better prices, and created a distribution network that served ranches and mining camps throughout the territory. Cole and Tom expanded their cattle operation again, this time with sustainable growth instead of desperate gambles. Samuel and Otto's workshop became a training center for young men learning trades. Clara's boarding house was full most nights. Kowalski's store thrived, and people kept coming. Not in a flood, but in a steady trickle. Families who'd heard that Silver Creek was a town on the rise, workers looking for jobs, entrepreneurs seeing opportunity. By the following winter, Silver Creek's population had doubled. The town wasn't rich, wasn't perfect, wasn't anything close to what it had been in its mining boom days. But it was alive. And it was growing. On a cold December evening, almost exactly a year after Eliza had stood up to Cain for the first time, the town threw its first community dance in 5 years. Someone had cleaned out the old meeting hall and hung lanterns from the rafters. Otto and Danny had built a small stage for the musicians, traveling fiddle players who'd heard Silver Creek was worth a stop now. Eliza stood at the edge of the dance floor, watching people laugh and dance and celebrate. Clara was dancing with the merchant who'd become her permanent boarder. Samuel was teaching his young apprentices how to properly ask a girl to dance. Kowalski was actually talking to people like he enjoyed their company. Cole appeared beside her, offering his hand. Dance with me? You dance. Not well, but I'll try if you will. They moved onto the floor and Cole was right. He wasn't a good dancer. He stepped on her feet twice and couldn't keep rhythm to save his life. But he was trying, and that was what mattered. You thinking about Boston? He asked. What? You got that faraway look. Wondered if you were thinking about where you came from. Eliza shook her head. I was thinking about how strange life is. A year ago, I showed up here expecting to marry a man I'd never met. Instead, I got conned, went broke, nearly got killed by an outlaw, and somehow ended up building a life I actually want. If you told me this was how it would turn out, I never would have believed it. You regret it? Coming here? Not for a second. This place, these people, you. This is where I was supposed to end up. I just had to take the long way around to get here. Cole pulled her closer, and they swayed together to music that was slightly off-key but full of joy. Around them, Silver Creek celebrated its unlikely survival, its refusal to die, its transformation from a ghost town into a community. And Eliza thought about something her mother had told her once, back when she was young enough to believe in simple truths. You can't always choose what happens to you, but you can choose what you do about it. Eliza had been conned, abandoned, left with nothing in a dying town full of broken people. And she'd chosen to fight, not because she was particularly brave or strong or special, but because the alternative was giving up, and giving up felt like dying while you were still breathing. She'd learned something important in Silver Creek, that hope wasn't naive optimism or foolish faith in impossible dreams. Hope was a choice, a decision to believe that things could be better and then working like hell to make them better. It was messy and hard and sometimes painful, but it was also the only thing that separated existing from actually living. The song ended and the crowd applauded. Cole kept holding her hand. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. "About how we almost lost everything. How close we came to failing. But we didn't." "No, we didn't." Eliza looked up at him. "We built something, Cole, something real. And I know it's not perfect, and I know there will be more problems and more struggles, but right now, in this moment, we actually did it. We saved this town. You saved this town. I just helped. We saved it together. That's how it works. Nobody saves anything alone." Cole kissed her forehead. "So what do we do now?" "We keep building. We keep fighting. We keep choosing hope even when it's hard. That's all anyone can do." The music started again, and they danced, badly, joyfully, surrounded by people who'd become family, not through blood, but through shared struggle and shared triumph. Outside, snow began to fall on Silver Creek, Wyoming, but inside the meeting hall there was warmth and light and laughter. There was a community that had learned to believe in itself again. There was a future being built one careful choice at a time, and there was Eliza Hartwell, the woman who'd arrived with 17 cents and a broken promise, who'd refused to let a dying town stay dead. She wasn't perfect. She'd made mistakes and taken risks that could have ended badly, but she'd also proven something important, that one person's stubborn refusal to give up could change everything. Silver Creek would face more challenges, more droughts and harsh winters and economic downturns, and people who wanted to take advantage, but it would face them together, with the strength that comes from knowing they'd already survived the worst. Because that's what hope does. It doesn't promise easy answers or guaranteed success. It just gives you a reason to keep trying when everything says you should quit. And sometimes, if you're lucky, trying is enough.